Everyone, we'll go ahead and begin with this evening's Planning Commission meeting. We'll go ahead and start with the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which has been a while, July 11th, 2018. Do I have a motion to that effect?
I'll move we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you, Maureen. Do I have a second? Second from Clark. Matt?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Andreas?
I will abstain, Mr. Chair.
Maureen?
Yes.
And Clark?
Yes.
All right, it passes. Going to the report of the chair and vice chair, I don't have anything to report except that it is my son's 8th birthday tomorrow. So happy birthday to my son. I don't know if I can do that, right? Anything to report, Maureen?
No.
All right. And over to the director seat.
The only thing I have to add is that it'll be extremely important that we have a quorum for the next few meetings, specifically until the end of September. We have a very large, time-critical project that the state has handed to us related to the inland port that you'll be briefed on at the next Planning Commission meeting. It's really time sensitive. The Planning Commission will need to make a decision, or at least a recommendation to the City Council in their final meeting in September. So we would ask that if you can't make it to a meeting, to please let us know and do everything possible to attend the next, we want you to come to every meeting, but it's really important through the next month.
Okay, great. I will be here. All right, let's go to our first item. This is some unfinished business from our previous meeting. And Kelsey is here to talk to us about the Ninth West Townhomes Plan Development and Preliminary Subdivision Plat.
Okay, just a reminder of the proposal. Rod Engar, the applicant representative, is requesting approval from the city in order to construct 4 single-family attached units located at 624 South, 900 West. The applicant is requesting plan development approval for the relaxation of zoning and subdivision standards. The relief includes lot dimension standards due to the proposal for a 0 lot line for each single-family attached unit. They are also requesting 3 lots without street frontage, and these requests are primarily due to the depth of the vacant lot. The subject property is located in the RMF 35, which is a moderate density multifamily zoning district. Please note the townhome units are incorporated into special affordable housing, which provides prices to home buyers within a lower income market as well as market rate. The proposed plan development includes modifications to the lot dimension standards in the RMF 35 zoning district. The modifications are due to the proposed preliminary subdivision. The applicant is proposing the lot lines for the 4 single-family attached units at the building wall. This means that each lot will outline the building wall for each unit. This is unlike a condominium project because the proposed lots include the ground located beneath each unit. While each individual lot does not meet the requirements established in the RMF 35, the overall width and square footage meets the requirements. The width is approximately 64 feet, 64.25 feet, and approximately 12,632 square feet. Let's see. Okay, so the Planning Commission tabled this item on June 13th and requested the following revisions. They requested the applicant delineate each unit with alternating materials along the northern elevation, move the front door to the center of the eastern elevation, add a front porch element, and the windows should reflect a residential design. So the applicant modified the northern elevation to include a hardy board siding on unit 1 and 3, as well as cultured stone on unit 2 and a gable feature on unit 3. The applicant also moved the front door to the center and recessed the front entry on the eastern elevation. The applicant did explore a front porch element, but without modifying each floor plan, he went forward with a proposed on-grade porch and then recessed that front entry as well. So there is more outdoor space. So in summary, staff is still recommending approval for the plan development and preliminary subdivision as proposed and subject to complying with all applicable regulations and the conditions listed in your motion sheet. I'm
Great.
happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Yeah, of course.
I don't have any questions to start off. Does anyone have any questions for Kelsey?
It's a recessed kind of area rather than a
Projecting,
projecting.
correct.
And there were some problems with the street and remember the project, like you could, going out may require different changes.
It would have required a reduced front yard setback. So it would have added an additional modification.
Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you. And then the applicant would like to come up and maybe just focus in on some of the changes that you made to address our concerns at our last meeting.
As we may recall, the last meeting, we thought there was some thinking that the north face of the building was...
You may want to make sure the microphone's as close to your mouth there so we get good sound in there.
How's
Thanks.
that?
Yeah, that's
That
great.
better?
That's better. Yep.
The north face now, we have gone and individualized each house so that it has a unique back wall as well as front and side walls. So we have done that accordingly. You don't see the colors there, but there also would be different colors as we complete the color scheme on the building. So each house will have its own individual flavor. On that back wall, although it won't be seen much, there's trees already there that kind of hide that, but we do have the siding and the combination of stucco and stone. And then the third unit, siding painted with a couple of gables, cantilevered out on the second level. And then the back unit would be, I can't tell that, sorry. That's a stucco finish on the back. Facade there on the north. So we feel that we've accomplished that, and I quite like it actually. I think it looks better, and I agree that's a good change we made. The second item on the request list there was that we move the front porch on the front unit from the corner where it was originally over to the center of that house, so that does look like and represents the entire project as a front door for the house there. And we have accomplished that by moving it to the center. Because of the setback requirements, the way they are, without completely restarting all over again, we couldn't really come out with a porch. So we went back into the building with a recessed porch and added it's not a deck area, it's actually, what did you call it? That was a good word you used.
Just an on-grade porch.
Okay.
Patio.
A non-grade,
Thanks.
you call it, yeah, patio on the front there that's, and with a short fence about 10 feet out from the house, just going across, so it does give us a little element of privacy, but it also opens it up to the neighborhood so that it's part of a home look. So we feel like with those adjustments, we have accomplished what we attempted to have in our efforts here. And the last item, of course, we just changed the window sizes a little on the front to make it a little taller. And I think they do look more like the old neighborhood there that's surrounding it. So I feel like we've made the changes that make this a very doable project now, and I think it meets the requirements that you folks had asked us to include in that project.
Yep.
So with our efforts, we would encourage you to approve it tonight so we can actually get started.
All right. Thank you
so
very
much.
much. Appreciate it. And I appreciate the extra time you put into addressing those concerns. And I do think it is vastly improved.
My pleasure.
Do we have any questions or comments or motions on this?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion. I'd also like to just express my appreciation to the developer. I think he's done a great job in making those changes.
Thank you.
Very accommodating of him. So this is regarding PLN sub 2018-00059 and PLN sub 2018-00223. Based on the information in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, along with this follow-up presentation, I move that the Planning Commission approve these petitions with the conditions as listed in the staff report.
All right, we have a motion by Clark. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Maureen, and we'll go ahead and vote. Matt?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Andreas?
Yay.
Maureen?
Yes.
And Clark?
Yes.
All right. Thanks for your work with us. Congratulations.
Very much. Pleasure.
All right, moving on to our first public hearing. Item number 1, this is the Fairmont Conditional Building and Site Design Review. Daniel, hello.
Hi, thank you. So this is a development proposal, again at 1034 East Elm Avenue. It's located at the intersection of Elm and McClellan Street in the Sugar House area. The property is located in the Sugar House Business District 2 zone and is adjacent to a large multifamily development across the street to the north. There's also an ongoing under construction apartment building to the east. To the west of the property is single family residential zones. And to the south is a auto detailing shop. Also, the streetcar station is just a minute walk down the block. And you can see that in the map as well. So just up front, we are recommending approval of this development. And we'll go into a few details about it. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of the building and the site, but I'll leave the architectural details to the developer to go over. This is a rendering of the building as viewed from McClellan and Elm Street, Elm Avenue. It's a 6-story building, about 6 stories, 59 units, and office space. And the entire ground floor has uses except for the parking structure entrances themselves. The corner has a large 2-story tall lobby, and the entire ground floor is glass with the upper levels mostly composed of brick. Just for orientation as well, this is a view from above Elm Avenue. You can see the placement of the building on the site is toward McClellan Street, and they've set the building back from the lower scale residential properties on the west by about 45 feet to 65 feet. The property line does jog a little bit. And there is parking in the rear yard, but the majority of the parking is underground and within the building itself. So because this building is located in the Sugar House Business District 2 zone, any building over 20,000 square feet or taller than 30 feet has to go through this conditional building and site design review process, and that's why the project is here before you today. This building itself is 60 feet. So the CBSDR standards generally deal with pedestrian orientation of the building and features of the building, and also deals with overall visual interest of the facades of the building. You can request some modifications to the specific design standards for properties through this process, like setbacks and glass percentages, but the intent of the standard still must be met. And the projects in the Sugar House zone are also reviewed against the Sugar House design guidelines, which are about 110 different guidelines dealing with landscaping, parking, building, and architectural details. So the developer is requesting a small modification through this process. They're requesting a small 1.5, about 1.5 foot step back modification. So the building itself would meet the 15-foot step back requirement at the upper levels, which is required for any building in Sugar House, has to have this upper level step back. But they are pushing the front of the building inward a little bit into the property by about 1.5 feet. And that's to expand the sidewalk a little bit more, to get an 8-foot sidewalk on the ground. So technically, the upper level is separated from the lower facade by only 13 feet. But generally, it's other buildings on that block are actually built up to the street, so they're all about 15 feet from the property line. So it's a minimal modification. Staff still thinks it meets the intent of the standard, which creates a consistent street wall on the upper levels that's 15 feet from property line. So we recommend approval of that modification. Additionally, technically, the balconies are within the step back area, and they're proposing some small balconies. It's a small encroachment. They're visually transparent. It does add some visual interest to the facade. It also allows for more activity visible to and from the street, with people on their balconies looking down at the street. So we're also recommending approval of that modification as well, as they both still meet the intent of the standards. Otherwise, the building meets or exceeds all of the minimum design standards and zoning standards. There was also a question about sidewalk configuration that came up from the community council. The developer is proposing an 8-foot wide sidewalk with a 3-foot wide park strip. They're accomplishing that 8-foot wide sidewalk by insetting their building a little bit so that they can add some additional pavement at the ground level. The Sugar House Community Council did prefer that they pave the park strip and put the trees in tree grates, but the Sugar House Business District guidelines specifically call for at a maximum 8-foot wide sidewalks, and there is some benefit to a landscape buffer from street activity for pedestrians. There's also a visual benefit. It's a more comfortable walking environment if you have some sort of buffer between cars and your walking experience. So we are recommending approval as is, as they propose with the 8-foot wide sidewalks, because it does meet the Sugar House guidelines. Just to note, though, the city is working on a redesign of that segment of McClelland. We're working with the property owners, and any design will accommodate the bikes separately from the sidewalks. So the sidewalks are not intended to accommodate any bicycle traffic. That would be separate. Overall, the building does meet the CBSDR standards, the pedestrian oriented at the ground level with a high level of storefront glass, entry feature treatments, including large entry features and some hardscaping treatments across the sidewalk that call attention to the entrances. Overall, there's also a high level of visual interest. There's a lot of brick detailing. There's a lot of window details with some shadowing. And there's a lot of modulation of the building front itself, which creates more visual interest. It otherwise also complies with all the other applicable guidelines. And so overall, staff is recommending approval of the development with some final details to be delegated to staff, specifically landscaping, specific plants, hardscaping, more specific brick details, final signage for the building, and ensuring that street lighting is installed in the park strips. So with that, I can take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel. Any questions right now before we have the applicant come up? Okay,
All right.
thanks. And we'll have the applicant come on up. And we try to limit our applicant presentations to 10 minutes or less. So that would be great since we've got a long agenda today.
We'll keep it brief for you. So
Excellent.
I think Daniel covered most of it, but my name is Alex Lowe, the developer on the site, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. This is Peter Berger with MVE Architecture, who's the architect on the site. It's just a couple things to highlight. We've been working on this design for a long time now, worked very closely with the community council and also the city staff to make sure that we comply on the various points that Daniel pointed out, and with the community council to make sure that this is a project that we can all be proud of. We are from the area, born and raised in Salt Lake and close to the Sugar House District, so this was near and dear to our hearts. Just a couple things to highlight on the design side. One of the things that we wanted to really focus on is navigating the delicate balance between the old and the new. And so as you see on the design, with the red brick there in kind of the Sugar House District, we think that's more a tribute to what Sugar House is and has been. And then with the glass on the street and the activating street level and also the metal panels on the tower there is kind of pointing a little bit to the future. A couple other just modifications that we've made as we've worked with the community council and with the city staff is one, is we were very concerned let's go. So we were concerned about our neighbors to the west. And so one thing when we initially had our design, we had an L shape where part of the building was going right up very close to our landscape buffer to the property line to the west. And as we looked through that, we felt like that was infringing a little bit too closely on some of the residential neighbors to our west. And so we went back to the design table and we've pushed the building as far east as possible to give a buffer between us and the residents to the west. And so as Daniel mentioned, we have about 45 feet to 65 feet of a buffer to the residents to the west. The other thing that we did is, as Daniel mentioned, is we pushed our building 1.5 feet back from the east side of the property line, and that was to accommodate the 8-foot sidewalk that was very important to the community council. And so, whereas most buildings are building right to the property line to maximize the space of their buildable square footage, that was something that we wanted to do to accommodate the city council. The last thing that I would just mention, we love the walkable nature of this neighborhood, and so one thing that we've done is we've incorporated a bike share program in the community where residents can use bikes that they can share and just enter a code and take their bikes around the neighborhood, which we think is an important part of Sugar House and what makes this neighborhood special. So, and the last thing that I would just say is that the ground floor office that we're putting in is an activated use. Our company it plans to actually office out of that space, and so we plan to be there. We're invested in the community, and we're excited to see this project in the area be very successful. So anything you want to add?
Nothing further, just happy to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Great. Well, thank you both very much. I have to say, I really like the design of this project. And whoever did your rendering of the sort of night scene, I think that's really good.
Peter gets all the credit.
Well done.
Thank you.
In fact, I think it's going to be one of the better looking buildings in that area, so I appreciate that very much. Can you speak to I know you just mentioned the office space on the main floor, and then you're using a lot of the space for the lobby, and then I guess the bike share stuff as well. So that will be the entirety of your main floor space, is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you look at doing any other sort of retail or anything that might engage the public more?
We looked at that. It's difficult with how narrow the space is to do much more than what we've done. Obviously, retail in this area, as we know, it's desired, and it's actually can be very valuable space. This is a little bit harder kind of at the end of McClelland, where we're a little concerned that retail would not be as successful there. So we kind of went back and forth on what we could do to activate that ground floor, which is one of the reasons we decided to put our office space there, which is obviously a very good thing for the surrounding retailers in the neighborhood.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Thanks. Anything else? Amy?
So along those lines, is there an option to do retail if you decide to move your offices somewhere? Are you building it with the ability to then put retail in there if that becomes an option?
Again, we think it's a narrow space for retail, but if down the road McClelland continues to be activated, and I mean we would be incentivized to then, if we could get high rents in that area, then we would be incentivized to try to put retail
I think
there.
part of the thing is we're looking for smaller rental spaces for smaller shops and not food. Part of the reason McClelland, I think, struggles is because it's 99% food.
Yeah.
A mix of retail is what really helps keep those things activated. So I just wanted to inquire if you were designing it and constructing it in a way, if in the future your offices weren't located there, that they would be amenable or able to be rented out as retail, whether they're, I think you would find actually many tenants who want some narrower, smaller space.
Yeah.
We are parking to the code minimum for that space for commercial use. So whether the Lowe's end up in using the space or not, it will be able to handle someone down there. We're not subsidizing the parking or going with a less parking ratio. It's actually getting all parked to code. So yes, at the end of the day, if a different use comes along, it can be rented out.
Okay. And then I have a follow-up on the sidewalk question related to a lot of the community comments that were in our report and photos and whatnot. So, that side of McClelland on the old showroom for Granite Furniture, initially that parking strip was grass and now it's rock. And rock is the worst thing if you want to have pedestrian movement, whether you have 8 feet or not. because you can't walk on it safely. You can't have a stroller or a wheelchair or a walker. And so that's one thing that, and while the guidelines specified 8 feet, the community has been actively asking for 10 feet for good 8 to 10 years. So the need for wider sidewalks is there, and 8 feet is a great start. But I'm inclined to want to have more hardscape that people can walk on there, and then trees in the grates, because it allows for more movement. Right now, you literally can't have 2 people walking this way. You have to go single file because you can only have 2 people on the sidewalk at once. And then when you start out with grass, okay, that's great, people walk on it, and then there's nothing to stop you then from just putting rocks there, that then it's basically unusable safely for anybody else. And so I'm personally inclined to see a wider sidewalk through that kind of a treatment. And then it's less maintenance, and then there's less option to then turn it into something that's literally unusable because you don't want to maintain grass, which I get.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, so especially when you introduce strollers and people trying to walk by each other, and all the points that you're bringing up, we think make a lot of sense. And honestly, we're very open to having additional sidewalk there, not necessarily the landscaping strip. We're taking a little bit our cue from the city and the council there. We did have a long meeting today with various departments in the city to talk about what we can do with McClellan. And I think our message from the beginning has been, we're happy to do either. So we think both will look good. And so do we think an 8-foot sidewalk works? Yes, we do. Do we think it would work and look great if we had a larger sidewalk or a little bit more of a plaza space there? That works as well for us. And so I think that there's some design considerations that are being, as far as what's happening elsewhere on McClellan, what's happening on the other side of the street. But our message has been that we're happy to accommodate, and we want to work together with the city and the staff to make sure that that street becomes something very special, which is what's the intent.
Okay, any other questions before we go to the public hearing? Okay, thank you both very much. All right, let's go ahead and open the public hearing on this matter, and we will start with our community council for Sugar House, and that is Judy Short. Come on up, and you've got your 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Judy Short, the Land Use Chair for the Sugar House Community Council. We like this project. I think they've made some good design decisions. I think we especially like the fact that the back side, the west side, has a nice buffer to the short houses that are along Elm Street on that side. The parcel to the north has a real tall building right around those houses, and it's just, wouldn't want it to be my backyard. Makes it unlivable. So I think this is a good solution. Amy stole my thunder about the wide sidewalks, but I'm going to reiterate it anyway because she's right. We've been talking 8 to 10 feet sidewalks, foot sidewalks, for years now, because you can't accommodate an open door, a baby carriage, a bike, a 4-year-old, and walk down the street. You know that. And the planner talked about the coming of the McClellan Trail. Actually, it is the McClellan Trail. It's just not doesn't have any signage and things right now. And you've heard me talk about it also. So I think a self-fulfilling prophecy is for every developer to say retail doesn't work. And if nobody makes it work, you know what, it'll never work. And all these conversations we've had about the trail use the Pearl Street as an example. I mean, we could have it that activated with probably not a whole lot of very expensive changes. So look at the drawing that has that first floor retail, or whatever you call it, first floor space. Most of it is the office space. That will be 6 employees. Then there's a secretary desk, and then there's the bike share program. And the leasing office, I guess, is part of the first floor. None of that's real active. Not a lot of people coming in and going out and sitting around and talking. So I really would like to see them rethink, maybe put the bike share down in the garage and do something more fun in the front. And extra signage. We've talked a lot about placemaking signage, and I think they're on board with that, especially as we try to identify the trail and where things are in Sugar House. We've suggested cutting off the northeast corner of the building, just enough to make that corner seem a little wider. That wouldn't take a lot away from the building, and maybe put those 2 benches that are up north by the dog park down by the door where people might be going in and out, a place where they might actually be used. And I want to make sure they know the benches they're providing are vandal-proof. There's a perfect picture of a nice, flat, wonderful granite block to sit on. That's the perfect thing for the skateboarders to knock all the corners off, and it'll take them 5 minutes. So they need to find the right stuff, and they can talk to my stepson, who's an expert at that. He can tell them what to find. You need, little balls on the seat periodically so that it's not easy for them to skate quickly. I think that's really all I have to say. We like this a lot.
Great. Thank you so much, Judy. I don't have any other cards on this, but if anyone would like to speak from the general public, now is your chance to do so. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing on this and go ahead and have Daniel and the applicant come back up and go to any other questions that we might have. I'll start. Daniel, maybe you can go into a little more detail on the options here. Remind me, I should have looked better when we were there. Is it 2 lanes, the road? How many lanes is the road? It's just 2, 1 lane each way?
Yeah.
So is there a lot of room? I think you were mentioning there's an option for the city at some point to widen the sidewalk into the road and take some of the road space into more sidewalk.
Yes, there's a lot of extra pavement that could ultimately be taken out.
So there is plenty of pavement to do that. It's not like we're working with the bare minimum already. And that specifically is being addressed, or that's trying to address the McClellan Trail issue?
Yes,
Okay.
it's trying to link that 21st South end of the McClellan Trail to the park itself. Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. Any other questions?
When I was paying more attention to the McClellan Trail design, it was basically going to be on the east side, so it aligned with McClellan Street across to so there wasn't, the trail actually wasn't not going to be on the west side of the street. Has that, I know it's still planning, but has that significantly changed that they would divide it?
It's still an option that's there, but they're exploring all sorts of different options at this point. It's kind of all over the place right now.
So
we're trying to narrow down options with the developers, and
Yeah.
we've been having meetings with the developers, mostly transportation division themselves.
Yeah.
So we're moving things around and seeing what will work best. So it's not locked in on the east side for a bike path.
No, but I'm going to say that I think for movement and safety-wise to cross 21st South, having the trail go on both sides of McClellan and then try to converge right there is a dangerous proposition. So I don't see a lot of opportunity for the trail to be established on that west side in front of their building. I mean, definitely you'll have interaction and play with it wherever it goes. Because one side is going to get this trail, the other side is going to get all that street parking, right?
I would just say, it seems like one option that's gaining momentum is kind of creating a shared space here with kind of pedestrians, bikes, and vehicles, and making this a 10 to 15 mile per hour road, and so that bikers and pedestrians feel comfortable using the road, but then also factoring the cars. And so not necessarily a trail that's on the east or west side, but just making it comfortable for everyone that's coming to this space. So it seems like that's, again, we're not leading that charge. It just, from our meeting today, that seemed like that's where transportation is kind of heading, but I don't know if that's...
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's anything locked in yet,
Yes.
but it's an option that came to the front of the meeting.
But ultimately, I don't know that there's anything on this project that we can do to enhance that. But it sounds like
No,
something's
there's
happening,
nothing.
which is great.
No, there's nothing
Okay.
that we can do for that now.
Yeah. Anything else? No? Okay, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I can make a motion.
Okay.
First, I want to appreciate the applicant and you guys really done a great job at thinking about a bunch of different things, being good neighbors, and you should bring more projects before us. So based on the information, the staff report, and the information presented, input received in the public hearing, move the planning commission to approve petition PLN PCM 2018-00323, the Fairmont Conditional Building and Site Design Review, with the conditions listed in the staff report.
Okay, we have a motion by Matt. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Maureen.
So I have comments
Okay,
to that.
go for it.
I would really like us to have a discussion about the sidewalk. I think that this is, I don't know that we want to put a condition on it, but I don't feel like allowing it to be grass or whatever is the appropriate thing here. We have the opportunity to actually get some usable sidewalk space, which we really don't have in McClelland.
I don't know what,
There's a lot of conversation happening and a lot of information that we aren't really necessarily purview to, but the eventual, whether it's grass or not, is not really, it seems like there's flexibility in what happens going forward, right?
Yeah, I
we're
think
not-
there's flexibility. I think that I'm concerned that we have the opportunity now to try to establish some sort of direction, because then what ends up happening is what we see on the other side, where it's just rocks and it's totally unusable and it's unsafe to walk on, yada yada. And so if part of the planning commission is looking at, okay, how do we try to address some of these things that we've seen happen, that we want to not continue to see happen as we try to promote a pedestrian-oriented, pedestrian-friendly, pedestrian-moving business district, that and the community has brought this up, that I think it just warranted a little bit more attention from the planning commission.
is the park strip under our purview?
Yes, and I'll point out the struggle that staff had was that we have to look at standards and guidelines and see if it calls for anything in particular. And in this case, it just didn't call for anything greater than 8 feet. So we struggled to find any way to compel a developer to do the additional width.
I need to
that's
point out
just the
just really
context.
fast
Okay.
too, we actually have a park strip ordinance in our landscape section that does dictate a minimum amount of basically landscaping, vegetation. So you have to have a minimum of 30% of live material within that. I just kind of wanted to point, unless there's an actual a recorded beautification district scenario, which we don't have along this street. So I'd caution against conditioning full hardscape because there is ordinance requirements that they have to meet with that.
Yeah, but they meet that ordinance requirement just by the trees,
They may.
which is
I don't
exactly
know.
what happened on the other side of the street.
And they may meet that with the trees. I'm not sure, but I wanted to.
So,
Wanna
I
look
mean, in
at
a
that.
sense, I think that ordinance, like, you just plant your trees and then you have hardscape and you've still met the ordinance of live material.
If that meets the 30%, I don't know.
I mean, it sounds like you're not wedded to the idea of a grass or whatever. You're kind of open to whatever the city ends up coming up transportation wise with this trail and how that's going to connect into the whole thing. I guess I agree with you, Amy. I completely understand. And I think we need some wider sidewalks generally to promote pedestrian use. But I guess I'm comfortable allowing the process of the city deciding what this trail is going to look like and how it's going to look.
The trail's not going to hit them. Yeah, the trail's not going to be part of the parking strip, though.
It's a question for staff. I mean, with all this stuff that's happening with the trail and what's happening on that road, could the park strip's going to evolve over time? To me, it doesn't seem like that's set and what that's going to be. If you're going to a street that's 15 miles an hour, like Regent Street or something like that, you're going to make changes to the whole thing.
Right. This doesn't lock it in perpetuity.
There's nothing that's locked in. There's nothing
no.
that prevents the developer from adding hardscape, correct? I mean,
Right.
you could still add hardscape if you wanted.
So I guess,
It-
I
it
mean, I'm
seems like this is a
comfortable.
It seems like this is a pretty fluid process, what's happening on McClellan, and so I think we would be wary of setting certain parameters when we don't know what's happening across the street or down the road.
Well,
But I think that we're
I'm
very-
comfortable with that, and I understand what you're saying. I think in some ways, I just feel like it's part of the role of the planning commission is to try to address some of these issues, and knowing that we could get something completely unusable, like you see across the street. That's what I want to avoid, and I don't know the best mechanism to do that. But I think the community has also expressed that too. Maybe it's not hardscape, but I don't know how to go about trying to look into the future of how to create some sort of a box where this can fit, where we don't want something that becomes unusable to a pedestrian.
The only thing that I would add there is that I think all of our interests are aligned from that standpoint, and obviously we're putting a lot of investment into this property. This is a property that we're not looking to build and then just sell like a typical developer. We plan to own this forever, and so we are interested in what we've communicated to the city, the transportation department, is that we're willing to contribute to the enhancement of McClellan. So what that ends up being, we're not sure yet, frankly. I mean, I just communicated what seemed like was getting traction earlier today, but I don't know what direction this will go. But we are willing to even, help with that, financially, because again, we think that benefits the neighborhood. We think it benefits our project. And so that is just something I know that probably doesn't necessarily technically address those concerns, but we are committed to that, and we want to find something that works for the neighborhood and for the street.
Yeah, the other owner said that too.
Amy, I don't know if you have maybe a substitute motion that would be applicable to this particular project, or maybe you're looking into opening up or asking staff in the future to look at changing.
I guess I would just ask staff to, as you do the final approvals and whatnot, that you very much consider how a pedestrian can still utilize that parking strip for movement.
Okay.
So I don't want to see it with cobblestone rocks.
You could put something in the motion. If there's something that absolutely isn't going to work in that park strip area for the commission, you
I
can
don't
put,
know, do we need to condition it, or can we just say, this is, pay attention to that, staff? I don't know.
It depends on how much you want it.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I'd like to call the motion, or call the previous question.
Okay. We'll go ahead and vote and see where this goes. Matt,
Yes.
Amy,
Yeah.
Andreas.
Yes, and I do want to thank the team as well for it's a very nice project, and you guys have done nice work.
Maureen,
Yes.
and Clark.
Yes.
All right. Passes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good work.
Appreciate it.
All right. Moving on to the second item of the public hearings, conditional use for the Samoan Independent Seventh-day Adventist Church. And welcoming David back. Glad to see you upright.
Thank you, Weston. Okay, so as you noted, this is a conditional use at 1624 South, 1000 West. This is for the Samoan Independent Seventh-day Adventist Church, in our ordinance defined as a place of worship. Overall site photo up on the screen for you. There is an existing church building at this site with parking on the north side of the building. Essentially, they are replacing the existing church building with a slightly larger building in a similar footprint. Will include a residential unit for visiting clergy, which past administrative interpretations at the city have ruled that that is an allowed use, that it's not considered like a hotel kind of use, that it's common at some churches, and the parking has accounted for that. They will need to do a lot consolidation. Again, just very brief site plan showing kind of the location of the existing building on the site, and the new building is in a similar location. A little bit of a rendering of the building. And so looking at the zoning ordinance standards, it meets the standards for conditional uses. Again, looking at all the different impacts. It's essentially replacing the same use at a similar scale, so there's not any additional anticipated detrimental impacts. And it complies with the criteria in the detrimental effects determination. So staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve this conditional use.
Great, thanks. Any questions?
Yeah, I just have an educational question for me. So they're requiring a lot consolidation. Why hadn't the lot been consolidated before with the same use?
Probably over time, I don't know, I can't speak to when it was first built, maybe that was missed at the time, or their parking may have expanded over time, but as we are re-reviewing things or coming in for a new use, we do look at, we do put that as a condition on getting their building permit.
So the lot consolidation would just be for now what is currently, say, like the building and then the parking lot?
Yes, they're on two separate parcels.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go ahead and bring up the applicant then.
If you wanted a picture.
And then just give us your name, and you got 10 minutes.
Sure.
Or less.
It'll be much less than that. Meghna Dobra with Architectural Nexus. I'm the project architect for the project, and David's done a great job of explaining the project. I just wanted to add that the owners, they've worked really hard to fundraise for this. They're really excited to get here, and we've been happy to help them get to create something that serves their congregation and the community and meets all the setbacks and height requirements of that zone. And the neighbor projects too, there's another church to the north and the multifamily housing project to the east. So and we've talked to both of them, so there's very little impact there. And
Great.
I'm just happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks. Any questions? All right, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing on this matter, starting, of course, with the any representative of the community council for the area.
Information was sent to the community council. They didn't ask staff to present. They indicated that they had no concerns with the project.
Great, thank you. Anybody from the general public wanting to speak on this matter? Come on up. You need to come up to the microphone, though, so we can get you on the record. And once you get there, just give us your name, and you'll have 2 minutes to give your remarks.
It shouldn't take that long. My name's Ernest Hards. I live directly across the street to the east of the church, and I agree with that. I think it'd look much nicer than the old building that's there. They've been good neighbors the time they've been there, so I'm for it.
Great.
All right?
Thank you very
So
much.
I just have a question. So they currently are in the current church now? The same
No,
congregation?
They moved out of the church to make way for the demolition of this one.
Oh, okay.
This is a very old and dilapidated building. It's been there for quite a number of years. So, yeah, it would really be a nice asset to have something new there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing on this. And are there any questions, or do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion.
All right, thanks, Amy.
Based on the findings and information listed in the staff report and the testimony and plans presented, I move that the Planning Commission approve the requested conditional use application PLN PCM 2018-00372 for a new church building for the Samoan Independent Seventh-day Adventist Church, subject to conditions 1 and 2 as listed in the staff report.
All right, thank you. Amy, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Matt. We'll go ahead and vote, starting with Clark.
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Andreas?
Yay.
Amy?
Yes.
And Matt?
Yes.
Great. Congratulations. Good luck. All right, moving on to item number 3. This is the Birdie. All right. Hi, Molly.
Hi, I have musical chairs tonight. 2 hats. Okay, so the Birdie is a planned development located at the southwest corner of 2nd South and 2nd East. And they are in the plan development process for a building height that doesn't meet the minimum height for a corner property in the D1. This is the site at the corner of 2nd South and 2nd East. Here's a rendering of the project. The proposed building height is approximately 76 feet 4 inches as proposed. The applicant has some changes that they're working on which may impact what the final height request will be. So I will let them talk to you about where they are in that process. In the meantime, I did want to talk a little bit about what the purpose is of the zoning in this area. So the D1 zoning requires a 100-foot minimum building height on corner properties, so at the intersections of all of our main streets. Building height is defined as the vertical distance measured from the average elevation of each face of the building to the highest point of the wall of a flat roof building. And our zoning code allows modification of that through the plan development process. So this is kind of the general building height, 76 feet 4 inches. One of the purpose really of this zoning is so that the taller buildings on these intersection corners really help to kind of enclose and make a place out of these what are very large intersections of very wide streets, and taller buildings can help kind of create more of a place with that, with taller building features. The applicant made some revisions at the end of June that provided a little bit more prominence to the corner with some changes to the facade that we felt helped to contribute to that prominence of the corner without reaching that 100-foot building height. As I said, height and corners emphasize the intersection as a node or a place. On two other corners, on the northwest corner of this intersection is the 2nd and 2nd building, which is on the National Register and is only 3 stories, so we don't anticipate that this building will change and become a 100-foot tall building. And then on the southeast corner is the First Methodist Episcopal Church, which is also on the National Register. One of the features of the building is a roof deck accessible by the residents, which is an amenity that meets the livability recommendations of the downtown plan. The building also has, some of the units proposed have balconies, approximately 27 square feet, and 3 feet in depth, so they're pretty small, pretty tight balconies, but they are outdoor space for residents as well. And this is also in line with master plan livability recommendations. As I said, there's a number of changes that the developer is working on, that the applicant is working on to address service access, emergency access, and in particular building height. And so I'm going to skip ahead to the developer's presentation in 1 second. We received 2 comments from the public on this. One was at the open house suggesting that with the 2 historic buildings at this intersection, that a lower height building would be acceptable and more in scale with those 2 historic buildings. And a letter from the Downtown Alliance supporting the project as it provides infill development, needed housing units, and commercial space in a very pedestrian-oriented design. At this point, staff is not ready to recommend approval of this project. We recommend that the Planning Commission table this project until some of these design details can get worked out some of these issues just came to light within the last week after this was already notified as a public hearing. So anyway, we're recommending tabling a decision on the proposed development at this time.
Okay.
Any questions before step away?
I have a quick question maybe for you. Because it was noticed for a public hearing, is it required that we hold the public hearing, or are we just prevented from having a public hearing if we didn't notice it? Because I feel like it's not in the interest of staff or the public to give feedback on something that we're tabling and they're going to come back with other information on. And then we end up having to hold a longer public hearing because they have to feedback tonight and the next time they come.
We do need to have a public hearing. We advertised it. There is some benefit. The issue, if there is any issues that come up with just the issue of a under 100 foot tall building, it would be nice to actually get some feedback, I think, from the public, if there is any. But we do have to hold the public hearing since we advertised it.
Okay, we'll go ahead and have the applicant come up and give us an update. Not mine.
Eject it.
No, I didn't.
They put it in. While Molly's getting that up, why don't you give us your names and...
Yeah, so I'm Jake Williams. I'm the project manager on this project for CW Urban, the developer. And I'll let
And I'm John Gowerth. I'm the registered architect on the project.
So we've had some good discussions with Molly as well. A lot of these issues came up. Fire had some feedback like last Thursday, so we've been rushing to try and get some solutions for you beforehand. We feel like ultimately the overall design is not going to change. The overall height, it might vary by a few feet. I think just from our meetings today, between fire and the stuff that we've been able to come up with, the ultimate height of the building will be closer to 88 feet. So it's actually pushing a little bit closer to the 100 feet, but it's as tall as you can go in a wood structure, which was kind of our limiting factor on this site. And it still fit within the context initially the initial feedback that we got on the context from the community council. When we met with the community councils, they supported and liked our design because they felt like in the existing historic context with the second building and the church, that really the scale of this building fit. And so we've kind of pushed forward with that as far as the design goes. The other thing that has changed, so I wanted to just give a brief overview, and I think ultimately when Molly and I spoke about maybe we just pull this and don't take everyone's time, I think we looked at it as an opportunity to get some initial feedback and maybe use this more as a design exercise to get your opinion on some of our design, so that as we go and resolve some of these issues with the fire marshal, we can also incorporate any initial feedback that you guys have as a commission. So ultimately, this site, one of the hardest things has been, and really what's driven us to ask for the reduction in the 100 feet, is it's only a quarter-acre site. That is further limited by the fact that as you, let's see, sorry, I'm clicking too far. As you look at the site plan, we're basically filling up the full lot with building. However, one of the things that came up last week was that the Gallantsons gun shop, which is next door to the west, has footings that encroach on our property that were not recorded anywhere, that we just found last week, which makes our building then move 3 feet to the east, or not move, the building stays there, but our parking garage shrunk by 3 feet. So it's caused some reworks in this ground floor space. But this has been the tricky part, is to go up to 100 feet and to get parking sufficient to service the market need for this area. Even to get to our 85 feet where we're at currently, we're having to do mechanical parking stalls, and basically it's a small elevator that stacks 3 parking spots in one space. And even at that, it's still hard to get the the amount of parking we need for the 85 feet in height that we're proposing. So all the stalls, as you look at this site plan that have this triangle here, are actually stacked and have 2 or 3 high in those stacks. And ultimately what makes it hard is this is a corner site, and we feel like it's a really important corner to the city, so it's been our main focus, is making sure that we still leave some commercial space, something that can be active, particularly along 2nd South and occupying this corner. So this is commercial space, and then our only big amenity to our residents is along 2nd East, which we have created. Apparently I keep hitting the wrong button, sorry. We've created kind of a co-working lounge area, so the lobby really expands and has fireplaces and has a full kitchen, and we want that to be an area where residents can go and plug in and work from that space and really activate the street on the ground floor. So keeping that space has been crucial to us, and it's been really hard with the parking to make it fit, which is what has really limited our height on that 100 feet. But we feel like with Molly's help, we were able to really address the corner and make that a prominent feature. And then with the scale of the neighboring properties, we still feel like it's a very fitting project for the site. And I'll maybe let John talk to some of the specific details that we were pushing on the exteriors of the building.
So we really want this to be, since the area has such nice historic buildings, we want to maintain a high caliber of quality with materials. So all of the street-facing materials is a durable material like this here, and that's either kind of fluted like this, as you can see in the picture on the right, or it's a smooth panel that you see on the left. More of a monochromatic contemporary design, yet a very high-class quality, and we're using aluminum-clad windows in lieu of vinyl, so that the building kind of maintains a high caliber of aesthetics and quality to match what's the adjacent properties.
And then also on the lighting, Molly's been very helpful to help us really get a lighting plan that we feel like activates the pedestrian walkway. All the signage that sits above the doorways will be illuminated, like the Illume light there at the top. But that's really been the focus, is how can we make this ground floor, even though it's contemporary, feel very active. It's got 12-foot floor-to-ceiling glass, and we've been working with the Downtown Alliance to hopefully find a local retailer or maybe a little coffee shop to fill that corner space and hopefully complement the active uses that are going on across the street with Beer Bar and Bar X and Taqueria 27 and the different neighborhood amenities that are happening in the area.
And on that note, Amy, I like how you brought up that there's people looking for smaller retail spaces. That's kind of what we're going to offer here. Is the retail space is 1,500 square feet, so be good for a small local coffee shop or a company that's just starting out that needs to be downtown but can't afford this gigantic space to lease out. So we're kind of trying to work with local brokers to find a good local company to go in right there.
So if you have somebody that is looking for a small retail shop,
let us know.
We'll take their name. But then the other amenity for the residents, as Molly said, has really been a focus, is the rooftop. We're working with a local landscape architect who has done some really neat stuff to make a really active rooftop space and give fire pits and barbecues and a place where the residents can spend some time outside and enjoying the urban atmosphere. Ultimately, those amenities are really kind of what we're hoping to push, as always, is really the community within a community, that this building will offer its own little community that can then go out and serve the greater community. But we'd be glad to take questions and feedback so that we can bring it to the next meeting. I think for us, with Molly's been really patient as we found a lot of things out from the fire marshal just last week that have caused some changes, but I think ultimately we're to the point with them that we feel like the building design is not going to change. The heights may vary just a little bit, and we're working with them just to work around how we bury the power lines and some of the stuff. Generally, it hasn't come up at this stage in our design process. It's been more in the building permit side of things, but since it came up, we've been working with Molly and with George Ott and the fire marshal to try and come up with the right solutions. But ultimately, the design that we'll build is going to be the same, just some minor height and width changes.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Andreas? Go for it.
Question, Mr. Chair. Right now, what is your final height right now? Is it 81 feet, 82, or 88?
So, and this is just because we, like this morning, we're talking to our structural designer, so I don't have a final height. I think just from our calculations, it's looking like it's going to be between 86 and 88 feet at the top of the parapet, as Molly had shown.
88, okay.
Yeah.
Which is closer to the 100.
Yeah, it's a little bit closer than what we had proposed originally. We were trying to stay in a lower construction type, and it just hasn't worked out with fire, so that's what pushed us back up.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
What is the minimum parking requirement that you need to meet?
Here, I believe it's a half stall minimum and a half stall maximum. So that's another part of the request would be we're in between the.
Are you barely hitting that?
We're at we're actually at 0.8. So for us, as far as financing and the market goes, we really should be at 0.1. And there's a workaround to get 0.1 or not 0.1 to get 1 stall per unit approved. It's hard to finance it with a bank underneath 1 stall per unit, but we're kind of in the middle of that.
Is there an opportunity to do more to do a taller podium, to add more? I mean, since you've got boundless height there, can't you do more podium to do more parking?
The problem with that right now, we're already a tall podium. We're 16 feet from level 1 to level 2, floor to floor, so that we can stack those cars. The International Building Code only allows the type 3A construction we're doing that your roof plane has to be, the max can be is 85 feet. So if we were to increase that higher, like you're saying, that would push the overall building and that construction type higher than what's allowed per code.
You can do wood framing.
Yeah, basically. And that's kind of for us, just with the parking and the way it is, the jump in cost to go to steel or to go to concrete at this many units, we just can't make that. It's not financially feasible to do that.
Okay.
We want to. I really wanted to.
Yeah.
We tried. But it's not quite there.
Do you guys have financing for this project?
Yeah.
But you couldn't secure financing to do steel or concrete?
No. It almost doubles the cost per square foot to build that.
Yeah. With the narrow site and the parking complications, you can't put more units in to justify that cost, so kind of pushing the limit.
Parking's kind of the limiting factor, just because we can't get a lot more units out of it. So that's been where we're stuck. It's only a 1/4 acre site, so it's tight.
So I am a fan of yours, and I love the projects that you've brought in.
They're worth the wait.
What's that?
Isn't that your
Yeah,
brain?
worth the wait. That's right. Worth the wait.
Yeah.
But I don't love this. I really don't. It feels to me a little bland. It feels like with all the vibrancy and the kind of quirkiness of that street right there with Bar X and the funky second the art gallery across the street. It just and maybe that's on purpose to not take away from those, but it seems like it's not really meshing with the streetscape there as much as I think it could. And I don't know, I'm not an architect, so I don't know if there's some limitations that come into play with the podium. We see so many podium stick projects that they all kind of look the same. And there's probably some limitations to that I'm unaware of. But I don't feel like, I know, so I was looking over the standards here again to see the compliance, and a lot of them with the plan development are, how it fits into the neighborhood, how it fits in the community. And I don't know, I don't even feel like it does a lot of that stuff. Aside from the missed opportunity, the real, and you're telling me these things, and again, I'm no expert, so I have to take what you're telling me at face value. But, you can build up to 300 and some odd feet there, and we have a huge housing crunch in our city, and I'd hate to see some density that could be used not be used. And so that to me is a little disappointing as well. So I would be hesitant to go down the path of allowing reduced height. Even though I hear your constraints and I understand that that's problematic. But I know it's done elsewhere. I know we've seen other buildings on small footprints and going taller, and Manhattan does it all the time. How do they do it?
Because they get $200 a square foot in rent.
So go ahead, Matt.
Do you own the lot?
No, we're under contract currently.
Contract for the lot.
This is kind of the sticking point for us as far as closing on it. And we did try to initially, we approached Gallinson's to try and expand the site so we could fit more parking. And he's willing to sell, but he's not really willing to sell at this point. So.
Okay, any other comments before we go to public hearing?
I have a comment. It's funny because usually we have to work with buildings that are too tall and want them to be shorter, and this time it's the other way around, and we're trying to get it taller. I just thought that was kind of ironic.
I did also want to just address, speaking to the design, and in defense of it, I think some of these details that we looked at the beer bar. We didn't want to copy traditional. We wanted to kind of key off of it. So we use a darker palette. We're using some really cool metal shrouds that will go around all the windows and metal awnings that we felt like complemented some of the industrial, like, raw feel that you get from the neighboring properties. Like, we're leaving the concrete raw because of what's going on next door. We didn't want to go build another brick building that copied and looked just like that. And even the color palette of keeping it kind of monochromatic, we fought the same battle of, like, when you put the same colors as everybody else on these buildings, they look the same. And so what's something we could do design-wise that maybe pushes the envelope a little bit, even though we're kind of limited on the size of the openings and all the different things that wood construction offers. I think that was one of the things we try to do, is really push something that's a little more clean. It's still got some of the raw feels that cue off of what's happening next door. So those textures that we're using and this material that's kind of a new material, we tried to avoid stucco. Yeah. It's got a really cool mitered corner that when the light shines down on it from up above is going to put really cool shadow lines that add some texture and dimension that maybe isn't reading from one rendering. And maybe that's something we can work on for the next one, is showing some of those design decisions that we made, that even though the box might look similar because that's a 5-story over one, we're really trying to make some design decisions that aren't the same striped beige stucco with another dark next door, just to try and kind of combat that. So I appreciate the feedback, but that is something we're trying to fight as well. And I think we felt really strongly that we did that as far as cueing off of what was going on next door without copying it.
Yeah, and to kind of echo that too, is others that have looked at this project are shocked that it is a wood building. And the rendering, far away might look like every other podium, but our openings are maybe even twice as large as some of the openings that you're seeing everywhere else. Is that our structural engineer has really been bending over backwards to make it work, because we want a lot of glass, we want a lot of views to the city, and like Jake says, we paid homage. We wanted that pedestrian level to be kind of gritty, to match the adjacent, but then we wanted to be muted yet elegant for the levels above, because just that we don't want to take away from the great character there. So we don't want to put this big, bright, flashing element on the corner, because in our opinion, it would take away from that cool character. So muted yet elegant is kind of what we were going for.
Okay, thanks.
Do you know how long that lot's been for sale?
It's been for sale for a while. I think they've gone through 2 or 3 different buyers that couldn't make the site work and backed out.
I mean, I have no idea why I know this, but I feel like it's been for sale for a really long time.
Yeah, it's the limiting factors are just the size of the site. I think now that we know the footings are coming onto our site, it makes it even smaller. There's quite a bit of power lines that we're having to deal with, and fiber optic lines and things that we're going to have to bury and deal with that make it a really tough site. But I think because we're from here locally, like the murals, everything about this little corner we love, and that's why some of the design was driven by that. And I did want to speak to Molly, talked about each unit has balconies. Those balconies are bigger now. They're 4 feet on the normal ones. And then even the studios have a Juliet balcony, so they have a sliding door that can open up like a balcony even on the smaller studio units. So it's a Juliet balcony on those as well.
Okay, any other questions, comments before we do public hearing? Okay, thanks, guys. All right, let's open up the public hearing, starting first with anybody representing community council. All right, anybody from the general public who would like to speak on this? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and come back to the commission for, I guess, a motion, since nothing has particularly changed.
I have some questions for staff.
Okay.
A lot of times when a project like this comes before us and there's some issues, particularly that are code related, right, with fire, and a lot of times you guys just ask us to approve it and then just delegate it back to you, especially because in this case, it seems like we're approving a lower height, which is bizarre for this body. I mean, it seems like that's the big hang up with this whole project, is the height actually being lower, not taller.
Yes, and because the height is the question that is before the commission, and that is the question that is also triggering the fire department's.
I do think it's going to come back lower than the 80 feet. I mean, they're saying that it seems like their height is limited because of it's a wood structure.
Right. So
it's going to come back lower than like 70 feet. Is that what your concern
well,
is?
I'm not an expert on the fire code, but the design that is in your staff report is a type 3B construction, which is the concrete podium with the wood stick frame above. And the maximum height by fire code, not building code, fire code, that can be used with that type of construction is 75 feet, because it is limited by the height of the fire apparatus. So the ladder that extends up from the truck can only reach a building maximum height of 75 feet. So with that limitation, the specific design that I talked about in the staff report was identified as 76 feet 4 inches, which is 1 foot 4 inches above 75 feet. So the fire department would require them to drop the building down for that type of construction to 75 feet, which would then lower the ceiling height for, I think, 2 of the floors. Please.
Yeah.
So there's kind of 2 measurements. The fire marshal is concerned with the top of the roof deck, so wherever there's people, which is currently it's at 75 feet in our current design that we had gone through with Molly, and that was type 3A. And then the parapet, which extends 3.5 feet above that, is what then gives you the additional actual building height. So moving forward, where we're at now, because we had to shrink ceiling heights, which ultimately we didn't find out and we don't really want to do, we would be changing the building type to a 3A, which allows you then to go up to 85 feet with the wood, but that is capping the wood structure. So the hard thing on this site is we're required to go to 100 feet. However, if you go over 30 feet, that's when fire has all of their issues that are kicked in over 30 feet. And so anything that we're dealing with now is considered, if we go to the 3, well, you can speak to 3A as a high-rise building versus what 3B was, you're allowed to stay under 75 feet.
Yeah, so essentially, anything over 75 feet is a high-rise building. So that means you have to have 2 points of access for a ladder truck. So we've proposed that we're going to go to a 3A, which you can go 85 feet, and that's why we're burying the power lines on 2nd East, so that then we can allow for a ladder truck to get on both of the street-facing facades. And then in addition to that, since it's tight on the south facade and the west that are boxed in by buildings, we proposed to the fire department to do a higher density of sprinklers, fire sprinklers, so that they feel comfortable that it's a safe building. So yeah, like Jake said, anything over 30 feet, you'd have this issue, regardless if it's wood, steel, or concrete.
And that was kind of where we ended too, is there an option to approve based on, we clearly have to get all of those things approved to be able to build the building with fire. But there are some of those limiting factors which we've been working. Molly's had to take too many of my calls in the last 4 days because the fire marshal didn't get back to us till super late. So we've been trying to figure out the best workaround for it. So it wouldn't go under that 75 feet, but we're trying to actually push it over that now.
And one of the things I noted in the analysis of the plan development standards, which is labeled page 22, but I think it may be further down in your actual PDF document, E4 of those standards, I talk about that compliance through the plan development review does not, and this goes back to your original question, does not guarantee compliance with the International Fire Code. And yes, in some ways those details get kind of hashed out as the applicant moves further through the building permit process, and there more design details are required through that drawing, through those drawings and things like that. However, because the specific request before the commission is about building height, and that seems to be a moving target right now, we want to make sure that that is confirmed before we ask you to make a motion on this project.
You don't think having this body set a floor and then delegating all these decisions back to you, that they comply, it's not gonna, you'd rather have it come back here?
Yes. In part because there are certain, like there's some other issues regarding loading, service, other aspects of the building. What's hasn't really been, I know the rooftop roof deck is a very key amenity for the applicant, but if that becomes an occupiable floor according to the fire department, it very well could get axed from the project, but it's also a key component of the project's compliance with the
Community plan
standards. So I want to make sure that those things are kind of locked in before. I don't want to force your hand on a project before it's ready.
Okay. Any other questions or a motion? The staff recommendation is to table it.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Besides the Downtown Alliance letter, did you receive any other comments from any of the other, like the church or Second and Second or anything, anybody besides?
No, the only other comment was a comment received at the open house, which had more to do with the scale of the building.
There were no negative comments, like anybody against? Okay.
So to me, it seems, I mean, I don't know enough about this whole property, but I think the property has been for sale for like years, and it's like in a prime corner of downtown. I know I think for some reason I also think that it just hasn't worked. It's been difficult to sell, and so I do understand their position. I think also the reason, like the problem though, that at least with them meeting the minimum height standards, are related to the fact they want to go wood instead of steel and concrete, which would be more typical for a downtown building. And that they're limiting to steel, and I think it's because it could be cost, but also we're pretty familiar with your buildings because you market them around the city, and it seems like this kind of fits their style of architecture. So unless we think we could hold out for a steel or wood building, or steel and concrete building, and maybe I think you're kind of with what you're gonna get, just because it's been for sale forever in a prime development time. But all that said, Molly wants us to table it. and I buy her argument that there's some things that might change. I'd be comfortable if staff was comfortable setting a floor for the minimum height that it could be and then letting staff delegate out. But if staff wants to review longer, I'm fine with that. And the applicant seems okay with that as well, and even though the delay is there. So with all that said, I'll make a motion based on the information, the staff report, public testimony, and discussion by Planning Commission. I move the Planning Commission table Plan Development PLN SUN 2018-00519 to allow the applicant to produce the additional information regarding the service and loading in compliance with the emergency vehicle standards.
Okay, we have a motion by Matt. Do we have a second?
I'll second it, but I'll tell you guys, I'm not feeling the love on this one either. Kind of like, so maybe when you come back, if you have some of those details you're trying to describe, if you can show those in the drawings to help convey what some of those details are that you're doing that are going to make it nicer and help it fit in with the neighborhood. I'd like to see that.
Do you have anything specific that stands out to you as something that you're...
Well, it's just, to me, looking at that whole ground floor is kind of like, blah.
Yeah.
And you talked about the shadow from that siding would give more detail. Well, that doesn't come across.
Is this triggering conditional, or site design review, or is it just?
No, it was originally submitted as a conditional building and site design review, but based on the ordinance, we don't actually have the ability to modify the minimum height through that process, which is why it's going through a plan development. So it was I initially did a review on it based on conditional building site design review, and then through comments from our zoning reviewer, they flagged that it was not appropriate to use that process, so that's why we're going through plan development. Along those lines, a couple years ago, one of the projects that came before the board was the 600 lofts at 6 South and State Street, which was a combined conditional building and site design review and a plan development in the D1 on a corner property for a building height less than 100 feet. Again, at kind of the edge of the central business district. That is actually at the very edge of the central business district. In fact, that particular property, I think, was even split zoned. The Planning Commission ultimately approved that project, much larger site. So it also could have gone a lot higher and gotten a lot more density.
But to Maureen and my defense, it is design and compatibility is one of the plan development components, and it does talk about its compatibility with the neighborhood and pedestrian interest and that sort of thing. So I think those are the sort of things that we've been mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not stoked, but okay.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second, right? You seconded it, yep. All right, so any other comments? We'll go to a vote. Clark?
No.
Maureen?
Yes.
Andreas?
I would, under a different circumstance, I would simply have a good project. I'd like to see it go through. You have very nice designs. I do, however, want to comment. That could definitely be a this time I'll vote yes, but
Amy?
Yeah, so I want to reiterate something that activates that pedestrian level, I think, is what we're ultimately looking for. As far as your building height, I personally am fine with it being less than 100. Since that's kind of the question too before us, just to give you that feedback, I think it's just that ground level for me that is really because it's such a cool area. I think you can not take away from the area and still be try to make that a little bit more engaging, since you're going to put some really awesome small retail in there. So I will vote yes.
Okay. Matt?
Yes.
All right, so the It is tabled. We'll see you back soon.
Thanks.
Thanks. All right, moving on to the next item. This is the Staybridge Suites Hotel.
I'll talk to you soon.
So the applicant is requesting approval from the city to develop an 8-acre lot approximately at 310 North Apollo Road in the M1 Light Manufacturing Zoning District. The parcel is an undeveloped lot with no existing structures on the site. So, and that's the site there. This is a proposal. What they want to do is eventually put 3 hotels and a restaurant
And
on
I'm
the
gonna
site.
I'm gonna interrupt you really quick. Can you pull the microphone a little closer? We're not hearing you in the.
Okay.
There you go. Thanks.
So the applicant is wanting to, is proposing to put 3 hotels and a restaurant on the site. There's a couple of issues with the site, though. One of them is that they don't have access off of 5600 West. It's an extra large site with it being 8 acres. And so they're going to have to create lots with double street frontage. And then they're also going to have one lot that doesn't have access from the road. So those are 2 problems. Another issue too is that with the development the way it is right now, they want to have the perimeter landscaping requirements for the parking lots, have some relief off of that. And that's so that they can have better internal circulation in the development between the sites. One of the reasons why they have to do the plan development is because they are subdividing the site. This development they could potentially do without subdividing it and without having the plan development. So what they're asking for is a relief with the from the perimeters of the landscape perimeter, and then also with the subdivision ordinance requirements.
Okay, great. Questions?
Yeah, and could you explain more about what relief they're looking for in the landscaping? What are they wanting to take out?
Okay, so the landscaping requirement between the lot lines along the parking lot, there's a 7-foot buffer, perimeter buffing requirement along the parking lot. So that would put 14 feet of landscaping in between all the lots. So each individual lot, let me get you to the subdivision. So here's the lot lines here. These are the different lots, and the Staybridge Hotel is the first one that they're going to be developing here. So along each of these property lines here, they would be required to have a 7-foot landscape perimeter buffering where they have a parking lot. And what they're asking for is relief from that, so that they
0?
I think they're going to provide some. There is one in our staff report. There is, there is some buffering if you see through here. And then they also have a landscape design. I'm sorry, excuse me. If you look at attachment B, there's a site landscape and building elevation design, and that's just for the first phase because they're only going to be doing that right now, and then each building they're going to do in phases afterward. So
I can probably expand on that a little bit. We have this ordinance requirement that for parking lots that says when you have a parking lot that's within a certain distance from a property line, then you have to have this perimeter, this landscaping along that property line. It works well for single parcel development, but when you have a property like this where in this case, if they weren't subdividing this development, if they were just building 3 or 4 different buildings, keeping it under one lot, this whole perimeter landscape thing wouldn't be an issue. They'd still have to do it on the outside perimeter of the excuse me, of the whole site. But because they are doing a subdivision, this is still going to operate like it's one entire site. But they're putting property lines in just for ownership purposes. It kicks in this perimeter parking lot landscaping, which then kind of disrupts the internal circulation of the site.
So follow up on that, then by giving relief, are you also giving relief to the outside perimeter landscaping, or just the
No.
parking lot?
Just the interior, so that they can have easier access in between
The
the
requirement for
buildings.
the ordinance for landscaping on the perimeter of each of these lots on the outside is still valid.
Yeah, they would still have all of like all of the yard requirements, the 5% parking lot landscaping requirement. They're also proposing to put in additional landscaping, like little garden areas and that type of stuff throughout the development as well.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
Uh-huh.
Any other questions? Okay. Guess the applicant have anything to add? Okay. No, you don't need to if you don't want to. All right. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. I don't know do we have a community council that's out in that neck of the woods? Or anybody from the general public who would like to come up and speak? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it up to the commission for any additional questions or a motion. Anybody?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Maureen. I knew you were working on it. Okay, go
I
for
gotta
it.
go from one thing to another. around here, right? Wait a minute, this doesn't have all this stuff in it. No, but it doesn't have the numbers and stuff in the. So this motion sheet doesn't have like the PLN numbers and stuff in it?
I can give you the PLN numbers.
Okay, I think I got it here. Okay. Based on the information in the staff report, public testimony, and discussion by the planning commission, I move the planning commission approve this plan development request. PLN SUB 2018-00264 and PLN SUB 2018-00244. 424. Request as proposed and subject to the conditions contained in the staff report. That get
Perfect.
everything?
That's great.
Okay. We have a motion by Maureen. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Clark. We'll start voting with Matt.
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Andreas?
Yay.
Maureen?
Yes.
And Clark?
Yes.
All right. Thanks so much. Thanks, Hannah. All right, moving on to the next item. This is the Hopkins Estate Plan Development and Preliminary Subdivision. Hello, Ashley.
Hello. Great. All right, are you ready? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so this evening I have a request made by Clayton Homes on behalf of the property owners for a plan development and preliminary subdivision approvals to develop 5 new lots and a private driveway at 1950 and 1960 South, 1700 East, which is located in the R1 7000 single-family residential zoning district. Plan development approval is required as 4 of the lots would not have frontage on a public street, and the applicant has also requested reduction in the front and rear yard setback dimensions on Lot 1, which abuts 1700 East. So the subject property consists of 2 parcels that have frontage on 1700 East. Each lot currently contains a single-family home, and a paved driveway runs between the 2 homes and leads to a large backyard kind of field area. This open area contains 2 accessory structures and appears to be used right now for the storage of vehicles and some other large items. As you can see on the aerials, the parcel is deep within an area zoned R1 7000, so the site is largely surrounded by single-family residential uses. There is a planned development directly to the north of the property that was approved in 2000, and it is essentially a mirror image of what's being proposed this evening. A similar layout, except the project to the north has 4 homes. This project would have 5 homes, but this property does have more land than that project had. Next one. So here are some site photos. The top one's just a Google Street View of the site. So those 2 homes with the drive running between them are part of the site. And then the bottom photos show the back 2 corners of the property. So actually at the end of this pavement, more than half of the site is actually like grassy field area. So it's still a bit larger than what you can even see in this photo. It's hard to get a good picture of an acre at one time. So the top left, this is just a couple photos of surrounding single-family homes in the area. The top left is on 17th East on the same block face directly to the south. The top right photo is looking down that Kirsten Place, looking at the planned development that's to the north. And then on the bottom, that's just more single-family homes to the north. So there's a mix of kind of mid-century era homes, and then there are a couple older homes, but it's all pretty simple architecture, 1 to 1.5 stories. So this slide shows the site plan for the proposed development. Contains 5 new lots that are oriented in an east to west direction and will be accessed by a new private driveway that stems off of 1700 East. The applicant is a home builder. He plans to sell each lot individually for the construction of single-family homes. So for this reason, the submitted plans reflect site and landscaping improvements, and they do specify building envelopes. But the design of the 5 structures would ultimately be up to the purchasers of each lot. I added the red lines on this site plan to try to highlight the lot lines. But each lot, total lot areas, they range from 8,400 square feet to 9,800 square feet. That does include the area of the private drive, but it exceeds the 7,000 square foot minimum lot size for the zone. The gray boxes represent the proposed building envelopes. Each one is approximately 3,000 square feet, which is basically the maximum possible footprint that each home could have. And the single-family homes would face the private driveway, and the applicant has indicated that the home on Lot 1, which fronts 1700 East, that would have primary facade features along 1700 East and on the facade abutting the private driveway. And Lot 1 is proposed to have direct access off of 17th East. You can see that it has its own driveway. Lots 2 through 5 would be accessed by that private drive. And then lots 2 and 3, and then lots 4 and 5, they each have a shared driveway running between them. That shared driveway leads back to 2-car garages that'll be located towards the rear of the homes. And then those driveways actually extend past the building envelopes, and there's enough room for, I'm sure it'll be used for turnaround area, but also each lot could have 1 guest parking space. I think that's it. So again, to reiterate, they need plan development approval because lots 2 through 5 would not have frontage on a public street, and the applicant is requesting reduced front and rear yard setback dimensions for Lot 1. So you can see the green area highlighted is on the east side is the front yard for Lot 1, and then per code, the opposite yard would be the rear yard. So the front yard, they're asking for a 20-foot front yard rather than the average of the block face, which is approximately 27 feet. So it's a 7-foot reduction in the front yard. And that rear yard is actually 6 feet rather than 25. But this setback is obviously internal to the project, and it functions more like an interior side yard. So staff finds that it's an appropriate request. And then the remainder of the building envelopes on lots 2 through 5, they all meet the minimum required setbacks based on the configuration of the homes. And I did want to highlight, even though we don't have specific design details for the single-family homes at this time, they would be limited to the standard lot and bulk requirements of the R1 7000 zoning district. It includes a maximum building height of 28 feet for a pitched roof or 20 feet for a flat roof. There's a maximum exterior wall height of 20 feet. There are standards to ensure that an attached garage would be subordinate to the rest of the home, which these garages would be towards the back, so that wouldn't be so much of an issue. But everything at this point does meet the setback requirements, but all of the homes would ultimately be subject to these other requirements. They'd also have to be located within those building envelopes, which, like I said, meet setbacks with the exception of the front and rear yards for Lot 1. And because we don't have the design of those homes right now, staff is recommending a couple conditions of approval related to the structure's designs, just to ensure compliance with the purpose statements for plan developments and for the R1 7000 zoning district. So the first two proposed recommended conditions of approval are actually required by code. I included them here just kind of as an affirmation that, there are standards related to the design of these homes. We do want to ensure that the facade of the structure on Lot 1 that abuts 1700 East, we want to ensure that that does have front facade features, and it looks more, looks and feels more like a front facade for the home, even if that's not how it's used. And then the eastern facade of the structure on Lot 1, the same side, would be subject to those standards for attached garages, because there would be a garage on 1700 East as currently proposed. And then the third condition of approval is one that we added. It's meant to ensure that the use of building materials that are compatible with nearby development in an effort to preserve the existing character of the neighborhood. So the majority of homes near the project site are constructed of masonry, brick and stone, stucco, and various types of siding. The applicant can't confirm at this time the architectural styles that the future buyers may choose to construct. They've indicated they're willing to commit to the use of brick, stone, hardy board siding, and stucco for accent purposes. Staff finds that these are all quality building materials that fall within the palette seen in the neighborhood. So we are recommending that as a condition of approval, and the applicant has indicated that they're open to that.
I have a quick question. Is there going to be a homeowners association with a architectural committee or?
I'm not sure about the architectural committee, but they will have an HOA, and that's a requirement. Before they can record a final plat, they have to get the HOA set up. And mainly because the main purpose of that will be for managing the private driveway.
So it wouldn't be for control of how the facades look?
You could ask the applicant about that next. I'm not sure.
Hardy board?
It's like
It's cool stuff. It's made of cement and it looks like wood.
I don't know how to describe it.
Come up to my house, I'll show you some.
We do consider it
Pretty durable.
Yeah, quality.
You're the cool
durable
leader
material.
Hardy board is a siding material made out of fiber cement, typically.
So we're not, basically, you're not
It's
talking about
paintable. It looks like a.
Like wood?
like there's one of the houses you had in the building, it's like yellow aluminum siding, and that would or would not fit under
No, that wouldn't, well, hardy
Not
board,
fit
no,
under-
isn't. It's its own material. It is something that we actually allow in the historic district, so.
So
we do.
aluminum siding though is not allowed in the 5 homes under the proposal. Is that right?
No, if that condition was
No, it's fine.
incorporated in the motion, it wouldn't be allowed. So this is my last slide. I actually just wanted to touch on the development potential of this site if they did not get plan development approval. So in this zoning district, the minimum lot width is 50 feet, and this lot is about 141 feet wide. So the most they could do is subdivide or just do a lot line adjustment to create 2 lots. They'd be about 313 feet deep, and each lot could have a single family home. So it's essentially what already exists on site. Another option would be to build an access road that meets public standards and could be dedicated. But the road would have to be about 40 to 50 feet based on just transportation design documents, which would take about, that access road plus the front yard setback would take away about half the site. So it would greatly reduce the incentive to develop this site. So I just wanted to let you know that. But staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve the plan development and the preliminary subdivision as proposed, subject to compliance with the applicable regulations and the conditions listed in the provided motion sheet.
Thanks. Quick question. It does feel a little unusual to me to let go of the design and compatibility components of the plan development. Is that giving it to administratively be done? So the plans, when they finally come, I assume house by house, they would then have to come to staff to get approval to ensure that they're complying with all of those things?
So most, because this is a single family residential zone, like I said, like most, each house would have its own building permit and it would be reviewed against the zoning ordinance. The things like the maximum building height, building wall height, they would be aware that it has to stay in that building envelope as shown on, because those are being shown on their plat as well. I would probably review it to make sure that they're complying with the building materials, if that condition was incorporated. But when it comes to specific design, like the architectural style and things like that, right now it would not be.
Staff would actually, so Ashley would actually, whenever a building permit comes in under this plan development, under our building permit system, anytime that there's a planning approval, planning staff is included as a sign off on that building permit. So Ashley would actually have to sign off in each one of those building permit plans.
Yeah.
Fun for you. So it would be up to you to ensure that all of these things, the one in particular, I mean, I am concerned about the building materials, but then also, we've had a lot of discussion with a lot of, I'm forgetting the name of the ones that are all connected, the shotgun slot, what do they call them? I call them shotgun slot homes. And our big concern was that front facing one, that it's facing the street and that sort of thing. Yes. And I know that that's one of the conditions, but that's something that we've been a little bit nutty about lately.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that it is super compatible with the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so back to my original statement, it does feel a little bit strange for us to let go of that control. Is it unusual with a plan development to not have the actual development to plan?
No, I mean, it's unusual these days because of kind of where we're at as a city. I would say when I first started here, it wasn't that unusual to have plan developments come in that were strictly kind of subdivision based, because a particular lot didn't meet a zoning standard, but they weren't quite ready to do the design. That's why I think if you look at our previous plan development standards, they were really all based on access and things of that nature. And that's one of the reasons why we changed our plan development ordinance, is because we do have different types of development now. This actually came in under the previous plan development standards, so we are reviewing it according to that. And so because of that, they do have the ability to come in without building plans for the homes.
So the new plan development requires that the plans are,
Well, it doesn't require it, but if you look at the standards, the
Yeah.
new plan development standards, where they're all based, or most of them are really based on architectural compatibility, scale, mass, it's gonna be a bit more difficult for a developer to come in with no building plans to meet those standards.
okay. The other question I have is related to the separation between the existing private drive to the development to the north. Would the vegetation between the two just be the existing trees that are already there, or is there any additional required vegetation that this new development would add to that separation?
I'm just assuming that vinyl fence would remain since it's part of the other development. The applicant for this project has indicated that they want to fence in the perimeter of the entire development with the exception of the frontage on 17th East. So there would be likely an additional fence there. And there is a landscape plan that I think had trees. I'm sorry, I need to find it. Yeah, there are a line of additional trees.
And those are
in that
new. Those are new
landscape plan.
trees. Those
Yeah.
aren't the ones that are existing there. Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
One question I have is related to that. I mean, I understand that Kirsten Place is a private drive, and maybe this is a question for the applicant, but was it ever approached to allow these homes to access their homes through Kirsten Place rather than putting two parallel streets?
Yeah, there was. I'll let the applicant discuss that. But I know they did try to take that approach.
Yeah, let's maybe get to that because I think that is a interesting. Yeah, we talked about it a little bit on the field trip.
One that I didn't make. Thanks, Weston. Appreciate that.
All right, we'll go ahead and have the applicant come on up and just give us your name, and then we'll give you 10 minutes or less to present your plan.
My name is John Clayton. I'm representing Clayton Homes. Do we want to start with the last one about Kirsten Place and why?
It's your time. That would be great.
Initially, when we came into our original DRT meeting, we had come in proposing to do a public road. What we were asking Kirsten Place was if we could go ahead, tie into their road, add additional property, and make it a public street. Came to the DRT meeting. They were in favor of it. They said, that's great. If you can get this to happen, do it. So we set up an appointment with the 4 homeowners of Christian Place and sat down with them and started talking. And it wasn't 5 minutes into the conversation that it was blatantly obvious that they were not interested at all. So we started drilling down, trying to find out why they weren't interested. When they formed that association, the master developer who developed it actually put a poison pill in it for them, that they had to pay them $145,000 if anybody attached, applied, added to, or did anything to the property. Yeah. So they're in there going, well, we don't want to pay the $145,000. And I said, well, why don't you let me go negotiate, and I'll see if I can do a better deal. And that kind of went on for a few seconds, and then a few people just stood up and said, we don't want anything to do with it. That's it. We're done. We don't want to talk to you anymore. So we tried valiantly to get this to work because we thought that would have been so much better of a situation. So then we went back and regrouped, and we realized, excuse me, that we had the distance, and and that's the beauty of this piece of property is there's quite a bit more real estate there. That's why we're getting 5 lots. If you look at that, even with the road, we still have 7,000 square foot lots with the road. That's not including the square footage of the road. So these are sizable lots. These are as big as any lot that you would approve any day on a R17 zoning. And so we thought, well, we'll go this direction. It's not our ideal situation. We weren't exactly thrilled about not being able to tie it together, but this is where we're at with the situation. And I think we've created quite a little subdivision here. To kind of move further on, the architectural end of this, these are gonna be 900 to probably $1.2 million homes. And for me to come in with a cookie cutter plan, which I'm in the townhome development business, so I build buildings and we have buildings and architectural features and everything about it, and we're quite used to bringing plans in and showing them to people. But these are expensive homes. I mean, this is in an expensive home area. This is gonna be a very nice addition to Salt Lake City as far as quality of construction, types of homes. And so we don't wanna pigeonhole ourselves into one specific product or a type of product. We think that you're gonna have 5 separate homes, and you're gonna have 5 separate architects probably drawing these homes, and we'll put some commonality in it with maybe some roof color, keeping all of the 5 units as the same roof color, or potentially trim color for the soffit and fascia or something of that nature. But we really want to be letting the homeowners, the people that are going to be shelling out this amount of money, to have what they want, not necessarily what we want them to have. And so that's why I've resisted bringing a plan into you. As far as building materials, these are expensive homes. Aluminum siding would never even enter our lexicon. I mean, that's just like, that's so 30 years ago, we'd never even think about it. So to answer a couple questions about Hardy Board, Hardy Board is a manufacturer of cement fiber siding. You're very correct there. There are several manufacturers. We are also thinking that cedar is becoming very, very popular right now. So there might be somebody that's going to come in and say, we want cedar siding, or we want brick, or we want stone, or I'm seeing a lot of these modern farm homes going up right now that are a modern architecture, and they're putting quite a bit of stucco on them. I'm not a big fan of it myself, but if somebody comes in and says, I'm going to give you $1 million, but I want this modern home that's black trim, black windows with white soffit and fascia, or black soffit and fascia and white stucco, I don't want to be the guy that says, no, gosh, we can't do that for you. I want to be able to give them that right. They're choosing, it's their home. That's the right I want to let them have. My preference would be to mix it up a little bit more. I really like, if you looked at any of our projects, you would see a great mix of cement fiber siding, you would see stonework, you would see stucco, and multicolored. We like to mix a lot of color in with our product and just give it something that kind of stands out. So there's not going to be a home that's going to be painted one color, I can tell you that right now. That help you with some of these things that I kind of heard your questions?
Yeah. Do you have any other questions?
What is your role post this thing in this project? I mean, we're subdividing it and you're going and selling it, or are you going to help?
No, we'll build all 5 homes.
So you're going to be actually the builder of it
Yes,
as well?
I'm the developer and the builder.
You're not just taking these lots and selling these vacant lots?
No, the reason I'm doing this project, this is not really in my wheelhouse. Like I said, I'm a townhome developer. We build big townhome developments, and a good friend of mine who owns the property, Mr. Hopkins, him and I have been friends for probably 30 plus years. And he's just asked me if I would come in and do something with this piece of property. They're living in a very small house. They'd like a nicer, bigger home. And so we have come together and said, okay, listen, I'll develop this piece of property and I'll give you a very nice home to live in. He'll be there, and then the other 4 homes will be sold to other individuals. But no, I'm going to manage this thing from start to finish. There will be nobody else involved in it but me.
Andreas?
I have a couple of questions, Mr. Chair. So do you already have those 4 potential home buyers right now?
No, we have not.
You don't have those?
No,
4 potential buyers?
we haven't even scratched the surface as far as looking for home buyers right now.
And the next question is, do you think there might be an issue with the shared driveway, the main quote-unquote public driveway? Do you think there might be an issue there between the different independently owned homes?
No, that's one of the things we'll set up in the CC&Rs to help mitigate that issue. We're adding additional parking at the end, so that'll be there. it's gonna be a shared driveway, so people are gonna have to understand that, yeah, you can't just pull in and park your car right in front of your garage and just walk in the house and leave it sitting there, because you have a neighbor that's gonna have to get in and out. So if we handle that through signage, or if we handle that with the CC&Rs and everybody signs the CC&Rs and agrees to them, that, you know, hey, you have to be a neighbor. I mean, you're in a neighborhood, you have to be the neighbor. And I think we can address that with our CC&Rs, and I think that most people will understand it. I mean, the benefit of having that garage at the back and not having your garage door sitting out in the front, we can put a nice porch, we can do a nice feature on the front of the home and really make it look like an east side sugar house bungalow type home. And then put that garage in the back where you don't have to look at a garage door from the front of the home. I think people will appreciate that, and I think they'll get along, I guess is the best word I could use.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. We will open up the public hearing. First, with any member of the Community Council, and we've got Judy Short. Five minutes for you, Judy, as usual.
Good evening. I'm not sure I have a whole lot to add. The staff report, I think, was very well written, and Ashley did a good summary. And Mr. Clayton answered all your questions. From my standpoint, I look at this as a huge lot. You know, a lot of the lots that we see where they want to put 4 attached townhomes in might be 60 feet wide, you know, and 175 feet deep. This one is, 147 by 300. So these are 5 very nice sized lots. And I hate to see everything being priced out of the market. We do need some lower priced homes for people who are buying their first home. But at the same time, we need space for bigger homes too. We have families with children and they need places to live. I think these look like nice homes. There may be some neighbors here to talk to this. One of our requirements was that the house along 17th East be required to face the street, and that's in the staff report. And the garage entrance needs to meet the required width compared to the face of the house for that house. I really like the idea of the garage being on the side street, but I suppose that could be up to the owner, person who buys that house. And then I added, the project comply with the Larry Bailey stipulation of the CC&Rs of Kirsten Place. And I think that's that financial agreement. I did send you a copy. It's probably attached if you want to read it. So, we like it.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak on this? You do, come on up. And you will have 2 minutes as soon as you get up here and give us your name.
Thank you. My name is Keith Brown. I live at 1886 South, 1700 East, just a little bit north of the Hopkins estate. I actually used to home teach the original owner of the property just next door to the north, back before she died. When they put that subdivision in, it didn't cause any problems for the neighborhood. I don't see any reason why this would cause any problem for the neighborhood. I don't personally know of anybody in the neighborhood that has voiced any concern. So that's my 2 cents worth. I've known them for 20 years or so, and the owners, and I think it's a great idea.
Great, thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, seeing nobody else, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Bring it back up to the commission for some questions, comments, discussion.
Yeah, I just have some clarifying comments with staff.
Okay, Ashley, we need you.
So to follow up with the chairman's concern over that front-facing facade, I don't know if the condition that you've written into the report addresses kind of, I think, the direction that the commission has been going for those type of things is to make sure that we don't just get a door on the side, windows, that we get it, that it actually looks and functions like the front of a house. Does your condition give you enough of that structure to kind of guide so that that particular envelope home has not just like this afterthought of we'll put a door over here in this corner and comply?
Yeah, so that condition is actually just a requirement of the code in residential zones, but it does indicate that they're required to include an entrance door and such other features as windows, balconies, porches, and other such architectural features in the front facade, totaling not less than 10% of the elevation area. So it would be 10% of that elevation area, which is a pretty large, it's, a side, technically, elevation.
Yeah, so I think that there's this gap going on between what the ordinance is and then what we see for some things is this door on the side, and then we all talk about it and they come back with something like we just saw with the 9th West one. Their initial one was, hey, we'll put a door on this corner. So because we're not reviewing this design at all, and I don't want to talk about like how the whole thing will look or whatever. This is more about how it functions and in relationship to the street. Is that ordinance kind of just allows the door to be off to the side, and then it doesn't look or feel or function like an actual home that's inviting you. Because we've seen modern architecture that does that on that field trip that was very nice, and then you see some more traditional architecture that puts it off to the door. And so it's more of that function that I'm really concerned about, that particular condition really spells out enough for you so that if it came before the planning commission, I'm pretty certain that those are the things that we would be zoning in on, is like, how is this working with the neighborhood and its relationship to 17th East? So I don't know if that goes far enough, or if it needs a little bit more clarification for you of what we've been talking about for every slot home that's been coming to us for months.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's something that you could add as a condition. If you would like to clean that up and tighten it up, I think that would probably be totally fine.
And I think they do have a driveway to that house on the plat that goes to 17th. And that would probably help drive that's the front of the house.
The driveway for a garage.
Well,
that's the front of the house.
yeah, but
I would
it turns it.
I think the driveway on the front of the house is very inconsistent with the neighborhood. But that we can leave up to it. I don't think a driveway to a garage is an interaction with 1700 East consistent with that entire community area. There's a handful of them where the garage dominates, and then there's no interaction. So whether they put their garage there or not, I think isn't open. I'm not concerned about that. I just don't want this to be a facade where it's not having a valuable, consistent theme and interaction with 17th East.
Okay.
And I don't know that the ordinance really captures then what, the direction that the Planning Commission has been consistently going towards for these slot homes over the last 3 months that I've been here.
Okay.
Well, we'll take some time and come up with well-worded addition, I guess.
Well, what's
Because I agree. I tend to agree that that's definitely in the spirit of what we've been wanting, and so
Well, what's a bummer, what's kind of weird here is like, if the street was merged with Kirsten and it was like a normal street, then that house could be a side yard or side yard, that front would be on the Kirsten street, and it wouldn't be one of these planned developments because actually it'd be more like a cul-de-sac type street, and it would fit and be normal. But there's nothing we can do that would try to get Kirsten Street into this, nothing to compel that other property owner.
Not that I'm aware of, no. I think that's more of a civil.
And that, because
issue.
other than like the slot homes where they're one big building and they're down, and they're a couple like down the way, like this one really is like it's big enough you could have a cul-de-sac type feel, like but it's just kind of weird because we've got these two private driveways that are parallel to each other.
yeah, I mean that's one of my, and I
I don't know what you can do about it.
yeah, I don't know what you can do either, and that goes to my first question earlier on about the sort of the buffering between the two, because I mean I think the worst case of this already bad scenario is that you have something that essentially just looks like two giant asphalt driveways going in, and so at the
With a nice vinyl.
with a nice vinyl fence down the middle.
Right.
So at minimum, like to be able to add some vegetation to create a separation so that there's like a big median between the two would be helpful in breaking that up. But I also hate to like put the burden of that cleanup on this project when really it sounds like the problem is the previous project.
So,
But-
I mean, I think we all, at least I do agree with Amy's concerns too. I mean, do we condition it where that front facade for that one building comes back through this body? Can we do that? Or is that too cumbersome?
No, that is something you can do. You've actually done that on previous projects, where you've approved a plan development, or a conditional building and site design, which allowed some construction to get underway, but you've had, a lot of them have been in Sugar House, where you've had a developer come back and you weren't necessarily happy with the ground floor space, how it interacted, so you said, basically it's approved, you can go ahead and start work, but before you, or at least your site work, but before you can move forward, you need to come back with those ground floor designs. I mean, that is something that you could do. I guess the tricky part in that is that, you would have a plan development approved for 5 lots, and then if you weren't extremely happy with what was going on with that one lot, I guess it just kind of holds that one lot hostage, but there's not much you could do with the rest of the development. So it gets a little tricky. It's just something to think about.
Okay.
Would that address your concerns, Amy?
Yeah, I'm happy to hold that first one hostage. Let the 4 go. I'm not looking at it as holding it hostage. It is really, I'm very comfortable with putting a condition where the 17th East facing lot needs to come back before us, based on the guidelines and standards in the plan development for that, how that is interacting.
Yeah, please, if you will, just make sure that you're looking at the plan development standards, and pick a standard that you can tie that condition to.
And I don't know if you, the applicant, has any further thoughts about, because I don't know if there's anything we can do. So perhaps if there's nothing we can do, then it's just over. But the in between the two drives, what are you doing to address that, the in between driveways? Yeah, come on up. The space in between the two driveways to sort of, I guess, best case scenario with what we've got is break it up. And I know you've got, I've got the landscape plan here. What's that?
Probably has to. Doesn't he have to have some sort of landscape buffer along that?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
There's a 5-foot landscape buffer. It'll be on either side of that vinyl fence that's there. We did bring in a landscaping plan. my thinking on the side is that we do need some trees, but we wouldn't plant like a tree next to a tree. We would, stagger them down the line. But we don't want to put grass or something there. What we'd like to do is just to put some xeriscape type landscaping, maybe some low growing bushes and things like that with a drip system, something that's going to be water wise and not waste a lot of water. And then the front yards will landscape with some trees and things like that, flower beds, and just to kind of dress it all up and tie it all together and make it look nice. Maybe put in some larger landscaping rocks and things like that.
So with your landscape buffer of 5 feet and then the fence, and then I don't know if you know, Ashley, do they have 5 feet as well?
Yes.
So there's a total of 10 feet
Correct.
Softscape between the two.
And there might
drives.
be a point at some point when everybody goes, hey, maybe let's just knock the fence down and we combine this. Then it would kind of look like like one of the Sugar House streets up here where you've got the medium in the middle.
Right.
And that's entirely possible. I kind of see that. I can tell you that all the people that live on Kirsten, they all know the Hopkinses. They're all neighbors. I mean, they all talk. And so I can't see that this wouldn't be something that would not happen or could not happen. And so and I think that'd vastly make both properties nicer.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at your front door and seeing a vinyl fence in your front yard, you open it up.
Yeah, for sure.
And I can't make them do it, but
Right,
I think
yeah,
time and as they have to repair that fence, it may just fix itself.
Yeah. Well, I would think they would want more people that could help pay for repairs and whatever on that drive and
That's
whatever.
what I thought. That didn't work. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, if I could, just addressing something on this 1700 East. We had proposed all of these homes face north off of that private street, and that's probably why we're asking for this extra variance on the, I don't know if that's the right word, variance, or just a condition of this PUD. But we're keenly aware that has got to be addressed, and it's got to be done correctly, and it's got to look right, because nobody wants to pull up and see the side of their house driving down the street. They want to see something nice. The garage is being put there because the other 4 lots have common garages and alleyway parking. And so as we've looked at designs of homes, these homes will all have kind of an inset cove type patio. They'll all have porches on the front. This one I had kind of envisioned a wraparound porch. So the front door may not necessarily be on the side on 1700 East. There can be another door, and I'm thinking more of a patio type door, so that we've got an inset patio type area that would be covered, that would be part of that facade. We can actually put some gabling and things like that, and some additional siding and stonework and things down that side. And with that wraparound front porch, I think we can minimize the garage, because I don't particularly like putting garages on the front of houses. That's not really where I got 4 lots that don't have a single thing with a garage on front. And so we'll work very diligently with some sort of a plan to make sure that this facade across the 1700 East is very pleasing to the neighborhood. You're right, Kristen Place, if you look across the street, they have a flat facade that faces 1700 East. Their garage and everything else is on Kirsten Drive. If you drive down that street, every corner lot going up and down that street has a flat slab-sided. We're definitely going to do something a lot better than that. We understand that. And so we're willing to work with you however you would like us to work with. If you'd like us to work with planning, if you'd like planning to bring us back in here, we'd be glad to do that.
Okay.
Either way.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Do you have a motion, Amy?
Not sure how to construct it. Can you bring up the motion sheet while I have this up? Okay, and I don't ever do these right the first time, so we'll take a stab at it.
You'll do
when
great.
I'm merging things together. So based on the information in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve the plan development petition PLN SUB 2018-00033 and associated preliminary subdivision PLN SUB 2018-00034 with the following conditions. Do I need to read them?
You can just say the ones included in staff report.
Ones included in the staff report.
In addition.
In addition, that the front face, do I have to like, okay. So in addition to those requirements in the staff report, that the front facing 1700 East lot come back before the Planning Commission based on the standard of compatibility.
Okay, good job.
A thumbs up from Paul.
All right, we have a motion by Amy. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Matt. We'll go ahead and, is there any other discussion on that? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Clark?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Andreas?
I was initially very leery about the project, but you have convinced me. You have made a very good argument, so I'll vote yes.
Amy?
Yes.
And Matt?
Yes.
All right, thank you. We'll see you back here sometime in the future.
Sometime in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks. All right, moving on to our last item, number 6 for our public hearing. This is the Urban Alfandre FB UN2 zoning district building height amendment. And you look more like Molly than Casey.
I am playing musical chairs and musical hats tonight. Casey is out of the office this week and asked me to present this zoning text amendment. So please bear with me as I stumble my way through this a little bit. This is a request to modify the zoning text to allow additional height for a specific corner property in the FBUN2 in the Central 9th neighborhood. 5 stories with a maximum of 65 feet tall rather than the 4 stories or 50 feet currently allowed. The site is on the southeast corner of Washington Street and 9th South, which is basically a half block west of the 200 West tracks at the Central 9th station. Here you can see, too jumpy. Here you can see the site in greater context. This is 9th South here through the middle of the image. This is 2nd West, 3rd West, and this is Washington Street. Sorry. So in this particular neighborhood, and this is another, this shows where the zoning is. In this particular neighborhood, we have kind of our standard 660-foot square blocks, but the blocks are almost very regularly subdivided in half by this mid-block street. So in this particular block, it's divided by Washington, and then the block to the east is divided by Jefferson. So it's that original Plat of Zion urban form, but it's been divided more for residential development. And this was done many, many years ago. So when this FBUN2, the form-based zone, was developed, it was originally designed for this neighborhood. It was part of a discussion with the creation of the RDA district. It was all kind of done all together. And there were 2 form-based zones that were created for this neighborhood. One is the FBUN1, which is kind of our lower density, more single family, though some like townhome type developments allowed in there. And that's the pink that you see in the zoning map. And then the FBUN2, which allows a 50-foot maximum height, 4 stories. And then on corner properties of the main streets, it allows additional height up to 65 feet. So those are the intersections of 3rd West, 2nd West, and West Temple, those corner properties. So I know I was up here earlier talking about corner properties in the Central Business District. Here it's a similar kind of condition where that additional height is allowed at those main intersections, though obviously not at the same kind of density as a Central Business District. So the application request before you is to allow that 65-foot maximum height, not on one of those main intersections, but on one of those smaller intersections of one of the smaller cross streets, so in this case, Washington. The applicant had originally proposed that 65-foot height for a much larger area, not just this single property, and it has now been scaled back to just this single property. Here are a few examples of what's around it. This is the site itself. I know it's probably a little difficult, easier for you to see it in the staff report. It's kind of a poor condition twin home that's on the site today. What you see in the background, in the top right photo, is the kind of multicolored building. That building was constructed prior to the form-based code adoption. So it is a taller building for the neighborhood.
How tall is that building?
Exactly, I don't know. It's in the vicinity of 60 to 65 feet. So it's probably approximately the height that we're talking about. It is if we go back or a page, it's a larger, deeper lot, though, than the one that we're talking about. There's three issues that Casey identified in the staff report. One,
So that building, that building's actually on the tracks line, isn't it? That
sorry, which one?
Multicolored building?
The multicolored, no, it's
Tracks line or no?
No, it's, I think it's on Washington. It doesn't go over to Third West, and it's somewhere in this vicinity here, about halfway down that block. Anyway, there's three issues that Casey identified in the staff report. One was that additional building height is opposed by 90% of the attendees at the open house event, which was held when the applicant had a larger scale, looking at multiple properties and bringing it up to 65 feet. Issue two was non-compliance with applicable master plan policies. So the master plan specifically supports the existing form-based code in this neighborhood with those kind of pop-ups to 65 feet at those main intersections. Specifically on the north side of 9th South, it does not have specific language that would support additional height or not support additional height on the south side of 9th South. From an urban design standpoint and really from a planning standpoint, typically you'd want your zoning to be the same on both sides of the street. It helps with the symmetry of the street, understanding the street as a place, that kind of thing. As that form develops, you kind of want it to be somewhat even on both sides of the street. And then finally, issue three is non-compliance with the zoning district purpose statement. And the purpose of the FBUN, Form-Based Urban Neighborhood District, is to create an urban neighborhood that provides the following: options for housing types, options in terms of shopping, dining, etc., transportation options, access to employment opportunities, appropriately scaled buildings that respect the existing character of the neighborhood. That in particular was the item that Casey highlighted for emphasis. And in terms of the character of the development, the lower rise 50 feet is what we think is more in scale with that smaller street, Washington Street. So with that, again, the request is to allow it to go to 65 feet tall rather than 4 stories and 50 feet for this particular property. And planning staff recommends the commission forward a negative recommendation to the city council on this text amendment.
Okay.
Do you have any questions?
Thanks. Questions for Molly?
We've just, the form-based stuff is new, I think, to a lot of us on the commission, even been around here for a little bit longer, but the form-based is a lot looser because you're looking at the form and the function. And I'm trying to figure out how this, I mean, would you characterize this as a spot zone or not? I mean, or what, I mean, I always struggle with these like zoning changes that come forward with a specific applicant and property in mind.
I think we would characterize this as a spot zone because it is just a single parcel that.
So it's not the whole corner that's being.
Well, it is the whole. It is the
four of those
corner. It is the corner of that intersection, but it's not all of those properties. That was what the applicant had originally proposed, was actually
So this
increasing
amendment
to
only impacts
65 feet,
one property.
the whole of, I'll let the applicant answer that question, but I think his initial application was allowing up to 65 feet for the whole of that 9 South corridor within the FBUN2.
I know you didn't write the staff report, but so on page 2, just reading the code, it has H.
Yes.
And then it lists out, I assume that's directly from the code, and so we're looking at it has
Yes.
Street and 900 South.
So that's why it's it's considered a zoning text amendment, because it actually lists the specific locations where you can go up to 65 feet.
Is it all 4 properties or just the one? I'm just not.
It's just the one at this point.
The way that it's written, though, I think it would be, I would interpret that as being all 4
True.
corners. Yeah. And on the spot zoning question, I think it was city and state law used to prohibit spot zoning, but that prohibition has been lifted. You can't actually rezone one property, but I believe that the way that this is written, I would interpret that as being all 4 corner properties, which would be consistent with the way that the rest of the zoning is worded.
And then my last question, there's no other tool within the code that the applicant could seek, plan development, variance, or otherwise, to achieve greater height. This is the only tool that he or she has.
Yes.
Thanks.
Anything else before we bring the applicant up? Okay, let's do that. James, come on up.
Hello, my name is James Alfondre, and I'm the applicant. I don't know where to begin. I think I'm going to start with just the reason behind this on a macro level and go to a micro level. Then I'd be happy to talk about spot zoning, and to me that's a typo in the zoning about, I have explicit communication with the planner on that, and that was a big issue, so I think that's a typo in the staff report. And then, so anyway, I'll go ahead and get started, and then happy to take any questions, obviously. So we have the site under control. We're closing the end of this month on it. And our business plan is to create a beautifully designed mixed-use project. Our business ethos is locating near walkable amenities where our residents can have a walkable urban lifestyle, be less car dependent. Obviously, Central Ninth is a neighborhood that screams to that. We love the form-based code. So our business plan is to provide as much ground floor commercial as we can, which we want to do the whole street frontage as ground floor commercial, reserved for locally owned businesses. And, you know, as I'd like to quote Weston, actually, when he said on the second piece that our city's facing a housing crunch, right? We all know that, and be ashamed to, in our opinion, not have density where more density can be handled gracefully. So from a macro level, from a city, from air quality, from the Salt Lake City housing plan, what it came out with, a big recommendation for that was providing housing and density near transit stops, which we are. We're literally steps away from transit. And our proposed height increase falls right in line with that plan. And it also falls in line with the new downtown master plan that is quoted in here that I interpret differently, I guess, than the staff did. And the form-based zoning for the neighborhood. We are not proposing anything that is out of character for the neighborhood. 5 stories is already deemed as in character for the neighborhood. As you can tell, there are already buildings that are built there that are farther away from tracks than we are. There are also corners on major corridors that are farther away from tracks than we are that are zoned for 5 stories. We feel like we are on, and again, in the master plan and the wording of the language, which I'd be happy to get into, but it talks about 9th South as being a major corridor where they want where they want density, and this just falls in line with all what the master plans and city plans are telling us for housing and how we want to grow as a city. So an extra story of height will bring more residences to a track stop, will allow more people a greater opportunity to live a car-free life, which has many benefits, as I'm assuming we all can realize. Now I'm going to talk about our height increase as it's relevant to the neighborhood. Like I mentioned before, we love the form-based code that's been adopted in this neighborhood. We've been working in this neighborhood for the last 8 years, very invested in the neighborhood and how it grows, and we don't want to do anything out of character or anything that would be deemed as inappropriate for the neighborhood. And again, in the staff report, it talks about nodes and where nodes should be, and it talks about the 2nd South and 9th South, or the 2nd West and 9th South node, which is this track stop. I mean, essentially, this whole neighborhood can be a node, right? It's so located near tracks. Now, obviously, you want to be sensitive to the interiors of the block, and especially where the single-family homes are. So I can get more into that of how we interpret the code and corridors and nodes and things like that. I feel like we have really good arguments for that if we want to get more into that and kind of opposing what the staff report is saying. Now I'm going to get down to kind of site specifics. So we control the Chuckles Lounge as well, which is an L shape. So it creates a U in this parcel. It's not just this corner, it's the Chuckles Lounge. And so that this corner we control, but it would be a bigger parcel that can handle. It's kind of hard to think of going 65 feet on this small of a parcel, but when you incorporate into this larger parcel, it makes more sense for what we want to do. So we got started with Chuckles. We knew that they're closing down and they were selling, so we approached them and put it under contract. Through all of our due diligence, we found that it's very contaminated. It's down gradient from Henry's Dry Cleaner, which is directly east, which prohibits us from removing any sort of dirt from that site. It'd be very cost prohibitive. So it becomes, we're not playing the card of, they're economic, this has to be economically viable for this to happen. We're still going to do it. We're still going to go forward with it. But the fact of the matter is it can be a much better product with more ground floor commercial with that extra height, because it gives us more creativity and more options to provide enough on-site parking while having ground floor commercial fronting the street. So that's just the reality of the site as well and what we're dealing with. And so as we got into and found out that there was all this contamination, I came to the planning staff and talked about this idea about adding an extra height here on the Chuckles piece because of the contamination, and it's right on 9th South and it steps from tracks. And it was met very positively. It was at the time Mike Malloy, who isn't here anymore. I have nothing but respect for our planning staff. Every time I've worked with them, it's been fantastic. I admire how they're leading us in forward thinking and how we're dealing with these real issues we're growing as a city. But this unique situation was because Mike Malloy left, it was kind of lines were crossed and things got mixed up, and it was confusing for me going through that process. And also it was a surprise to me that they came back with a negative recommendation. Because all of my conversations with Mike Malloy and with pre-submittal meetings were this would be favorably accepted. It's by tracks, it's on a main corridor, et cetera. So long story short, I had a meeting with Mike Malloy, and Chuckles is on an alley. It's not on a corner. So we were figuring out how to incorporate the text of, because it's not on a corner, how do we add that into a text amendment? And he had the idea of, why don't we just go for 9th South? It's a big corridor. It's right at tracks. Let's just say all of 9th South from 3rd West to West Temple, and we'll see how the community reacts. And so we had an open house, and there was some pushback from the residents on doing all of 9th South, so we kind of scaled back. And then he left, and things just kind of got lost in translation. We ended up getting this piece under control and started dealing with Casey, and just went forward, now that it's a corner, having the text be, the southwest corner of Washington and 900 South. So all of the, comments from that open house was for all of 900 South. I also never had the chance to go to the community council and speak there. I myself have then reached out to the community council chair, and I'm going to go there in August to present to them and get feedback from them. So again, having the planner leave mid-application caused a lot of hurdles that were kind of unforeseen, and so that's kind of the evolution of where we are here with this now. I'd also like to address spot zoning. I mean, the definition of spot zoning is zoning a parcel that is inconsistent with the master plan. And even though this is, adding something on or changing a zoning, it's technically not spot zoning, because it, in our opinion, falls exactly in line with the master plan, as I can read through the staff report and argue the case for that, in our opinion. But, I guess bottom line here is we're very excited about this neighborhood. We're very excited about this project we're planning, we're putting forward. It's a difficult site with the contamination. We feel like it's very appropriate. We're not setting any precedences. We're not asking for 6, 7, 8 stories. We're asking for 5 stories. That has already been generally accepted as a very appropriate height for the neighborhood. And we're on a main corridor on 900 South, just steps from tracks. And we're excited to bring more residents down to the neighborhood, for the businesses that are around us, and also just how we grow as a city. More responsible density around tracks.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Did you look at rezoning it to like FBUN1? I'm just trying to think through different ways that this could be accomplished.
No, because that down zones us.
Does it?
So that gives us to like 20.
2.5
It gives us to like
stories,
25 feet.
dwelling units. Okay.
And we're not setting a precedence either. Fayette Avenue came in after the fact as well and said we'd like to be involved in adding our corner to the text amendment, and that was approved unanimously. Or I don't know if it's approved unanimously. It was approved as a text amendment as well. So we feel like we're closer to tracks than Fayette. 900 South is more, a very appropriate street, as potentially Fayette is. So we kind of saw precedence as well. And also we're on the south side of the street. We're not impacting any single-family residences. Everything around us is commercial. There's single-family homes behind us. Those are under contract to be redeveloped as well. So everything's going to be 4 stories. So, we feel like we're not really negatively impacting anyone directly around us as well, as far as for what they're zoned and what they can do.
It's unfortunate timing, since you came in when we talked about second, and this nodes thing is a little bit, at least in my mind. I some of the stuff I probably agree with you. It seems like you're consistent with the purpose and goals and objectives, those other ones. But talk me through how you respond to the one about the nodes on major streets. And because I'm looking
Sure.
at the zoning code, and the zoning states that it describes larger buildings located on corner streets, and we talked about the urban planning element being major corners and queuing it in. I can see certainly I know the area well. Certainly Washington Street being a residential neighborhood. So just, I'm curious if you could just respond to me and walk through how you view that kind of nodes where people can see that this is a special corner and people come to for specific reasons.
Sure. Specific reasons, we're going to have awesome retail that steps to tracks.
No, I mean, I get why people come to yours. But
Got it. Okay.
So what I'm working with is so clearly 9th South and Main, where that track station is,
Yeah.
is a corner that you will approach, and there's lots of activity and stuff that's
Sure.
kind of going on there. And I can see, although it's not really there, but 3rd West and West Temple.
Yeah, I mean,
kind of having that same.
Yeah. So to be honest, I feel like we can be a much better node than what's happening on 3rd West and West Temple, just because you're on 6-lane highways, where if you talk about walkability and urban scale, I actually like where we are a lot better for that urban quality as far as a node is concerned. It was interesting too. I've come before this body before, and one of the arguments against what we were trying to propose on another project was clustering density around transit stops and then having it scale down from there. And so they're different arguments that you can cling to, or that you can believe in. I love nodes, but I also feel like we have a better option to be a node as the scale of the street that we're on, being right on 900 South. I mean, especially here too in the code, I interpret it as 900 South being a major corridor where extra height should be allowed. I think we can go back and forth on nodes and where appropriate nodes are. To be honest, I think you get a more vibrant node around a track stop than one that's farther away just because it's on a corner, which we are. I mean, it's really proximity to tracks and just that accessibility and the scale of 9th South and what's already happening there, and we're just perpetuating that and want to build off of that. I mean, 900 South is really the best commercial corridor, and we want to keep that commercial corridor, coming down 900 South. It's not on 200 West, that's all residential. 3rd West is, still a very wide street, a lot of, single-story commercial. The best node commercially, in my opinion, is just that node of 900 South, and we're perpetuating that, and we're going to increase and add value to that.
And right across the street from you is the Vertical Diner, right?
Yes.
That's on Washington there?
Yes.
Aren't they redeveloping as well?
Not that I'm aware of. I know, and then kind of kitty corner across the street too is the new Spy Hop that's going in as well. So there's going to be a lot of activity there. I mean, that's really the biggest node is 2nd West and 9th South, in that neighborhood with all the activity that's there. And so we feel like we're very well located to increase and add services and keep that a lively, street like it already is.
I'm good.
Okay. Andres?
Just one question. Did you get a chance to present your plans to the neighborhood meetings or any?
I have not. I usually do that all the time. Again, lost in translation with Mike Malloy leaving. I don't know if it just slipped through the cracks, but I was never scheduled to go speak to the community council. But I reached out a couple weeks ago knowing that I was on this, and I haven't talked to them yet, and they don't have a meeting in July, so I'm on the agenda for August.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But I've had initial discussions with the chair of the community council, who's, his just, not official statement was we prefer more density around transit stops, but nothing official yet. But I'm anxious to get there and kind of get feedback and talk through with this.
So I'm really sympathetic for what you're doing because I completely agree with the philosophy of putting as much density as we can near transit. And I think maybe the process this just went through with change in staff and now the change in request from something larger to something smaller, it seems it makes it really awkward for us because I think ultimately, people still see it as, the feedback that we've gotten from the community is the only feedback we've gotten. And we'll open up the public hearing in a minute and see if anyone else wants to speak. But we have a lot more emails and that sort of thing, and it does seem very adamantly opposed. So it's really awkward, I think, for us to go around that.
Sure.
What?
And sorry if I can speak to that.
Go ahead.
So what's hard about that is all that feedback was from our initial just putting a flag out there and saying about doing all of 900 South.
Right.
So we weren't able to kind of say, Mike Malloy wasn't able to be here to kind of lead us through that game plan originally. Then, okay, let's take it back now and let's just focus on this and then go back out and get feedback on that specifically. So it does put you in an awkward position.
Yeah. Any other questions before we see if any public comments? Okay, let's do that, and then we'll finish this off. All right, so we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Anyone from the community council? Or anyone from the public? You can come on up. Just come up to the microphone, and just give us your name into the microphone, and then you'll have 2 minutes to give us your remarks. We need you on the record.
Sorry. My name is Rosa Hernandez. I own a little business right between Chacos and the building he's going to build on it. So my business is a hair salon and a water store. So I'm right between them, right in the middle of them. So that's my concern. That's it. I just want to know what are they going to do next to, if they're going to go on top of me or, because I'm right in the middle.
Okay.
So
Do you feel like the more height is okay, or?
I think 4 stories. All the area is 4 stories, no more higher than that. Like the colorful building he's talking about, it's way almost in the 300 West, and maybe right in the middle of the Washington and 3rd West. So you don't see the building and the street. It's right in the middle. So that's the most highest one I can see, and then maybe right in the alley by Chacos, they have buildings, but maybe 5 stories, not 6 stories. But it's kind of, 6 stories is kind of high for the area, I think.
Okay.
But that's it. I want to say that.
Thank you very much. Come on up. Just give us your name into the microphone, and then you'll have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm Bruce Johnson. I own the kitty corner from them at 260, 248, 868, and 864 Washington and 9 South. So those 4 little lots. I agree. I'm probably one of the minority who in the community agrees that the building height should be increased. It's that whole corridor does have a high velocity, and of the development, and the underutilization of the track stop there I feel could really benefit from the increased density and all that. So just wanted to put the positive on record for it.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and come back up to the commission for direction where to go from here.
Hey, Molly, can I put you in the hot seat here?
Casey.
So one of the standards here, the extent to which a proposed text amendment implements best current professional design practices, or best current professional practices of urban planning and design.
Yes.
Does this meet? I mean, because I probably disagree. I mean, I'm just gonna babble because I don't know what else to do. And it's not the first time, Weston. So, I mean, I think looking at the standards here, I mean, I think the proposed amendment is consistent with the purposes and goals and objectives of stated policy. I think the housing stock thing is pretty clear. Transit, close proximity to transit. I think, the proposed text amendments furthers the specific purpose of the zoning ordinance that's listed there. I mean, certainly you look at this purpose statements are people-oriented places, options for housing types, options for shopping, dining, fulfilling, transportation, employment opportunities, and clearly that would support, I think that probably fits those standards, what he's talking about. Proposed text amendment is consistent with the purposes and provisions that there's no overlay district, doesn't matter. But so this one here, though, the extent to which the proposed text amendment implements best current professional practices of urban planning and design. And so talk me through a little bit more, like this whole concept of that you kind of presented here, and you had the little like cartoonish image in your last thing that talked about major street corners having these taller buildings to signify that this was a major sort of place. Talk me through more, like, where does that come from? How long has it been around? Is it current, not current? Is the world changing or not changing, that sort of view? I mean, is that like, do you follow me what I'm
It's a
saying?
fairly established urban planning, urban design principle of taller height at intersections. Barcelona has kind of probably one of the most recognizable examples of that, in a very consistent urban form, and how that got implemented many, many years ago. And so, that's a fairly consistent thing. We could also talk about the difference in like width of the right-of-way in comparison to the height of the building, or height of the allowed building, and how, not necessarily Salt Lake City, but how cities determine, what is a reasonable height to width ratio. And, that would be one thing that you might want to consider in your decision. How does that, one thing is that 9 South actually represents a shift in the grid. So the street width actually, particularly on Washington, is narrower south of 9th than it is north of 9th. Well, 9th, 3rd, 2nd, and West Temple are all kind of consistent widths. Those other streets are narrower. So that, helps. There's a relationship between the building height and the street width in terms of, how a pedestrian feels when they're walking down the street, and that human scale aspect. And that was, one of the big intents with the creation of this form-based code was about, yes, providing the ability for additional density at a track stop, but also to keep in a more human scale form of development, and not just kind of zone it for, a great density, but more of this more human scaled aspect. That to say the difference between 50 feet and 65, it's 15 feet. It's a 1-story difference. That's not 2 stories. Is that I think you're going to have to determine whether or not you feel that that's like a major shift in that height, that building height and density, and what that might mean for Washington Street in particular. And then, how does that compare to, we already have the 65-foot max height for the intersection at 2nd West or 3rd West. So I don't know if I answered your question, but.
I mean, it's interesting too. I know a lot about that corner. So 2nd West and 9th South is probably that main point, but none of those buildings are anywhere near 65 feet. Spy Hop is 3 stories. The new condos or apartments that are going up, worth the wait. I think they're 4 stories. Or 3. Where Blue Copper kind of is 1, and you got Reagan's billboard. Don't get me wrong,
1.
It's a great use of property.
There's
there.
a billboard on the actual corner, yes.
Chuckles, sad to see it go. It's definitely had its time. But no, all those buildings are all low. They're not anywhere near, which is interesting. Seems like the urban form there, the idea, because a lot of those are new, they haven't prompted a 65-foot buildings.
Well, and in some cases didn't prompt anything over 1 story. And I think part of that was at the time that they were being developed, the argument for some of those properties was that the market wasn't there to support greater density at this location, even though we were talking about, half a block from a track station. 4 and 5 years ago.
But I mean, the new condos in the corner are brand new, and then Spy Hop is yet to be built, and then I don't think Blue Copper's been there, but it's 3 or 4 years.
Blue Copper,
Access Architecture.
5,
5 is when that went
I
in?
think about 5 years, yeah.
I mean, I think it's reasonable, those examples, you're not going to see more development on that node except for that one corner where the cleaner is, right? And that's probably going to get a big building on it. And I think the reality of this area is that area is going to be that it's going to get more dense, and we're going to want more. We're going to want more amenities and more housing on that corner. I'm personally in favor of giving them the height, but I don't know exactly how to. I haven't totally formulated my justification for that based on some sort of conditions.
Well, remember,
in the report.
you're making a recommendation to City Council, so you don't have to have all of the details that you would on a regular Planning Commission motion.
Sure, we still need to tie it to a reason, though, right? If we're going against staff recommendation, no.
Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely, the city council will be interested to hear your reasoning behind why that is.
Well, beyond what I just said, then do I need to say like some other like when we're approving something and I have to tie it to something in the report?
You can tie it to those standards. So if you look on your staff report,
Talking about page, I don't know what page it is.
why there's no page numbers on this, but
Just the first table there, that's discussion, section 20.
yeah, it's under the discussion. Those are the standards. If you feel it is consistent with plans and it is, the interesting thing with this is a legislative item, and the way that the wording is that the Planning Commission and City Council should consider these things when making a decision. It doesn't say they shall consider these things. So it's a little different than conditional use and plan development where, the city council they should consider these, but they don't have to base their decision on that. But I think the city council is definitely going to want to hear from the planning commission what, feedback from you, how you think it meets those standards.
So Molly, would you say that the general understanding of the community is that the request coming forward is that the request is to change everything on 9th South? Because that was the original request, and that's where we have most
That was
of
the
the
original
feedback from.
request. I believe in the Dropbox folder, there's one email that was received more recently.
Yeah.
That iterated the same sentiments as back in December, even though the request has been scaled back to the single site.
Because for me, that's my biggest concern is I'm not necessarily opposed to the additional height, and I think that perhaps that could work there. But I just think process-wise, I'm concerned that there's confusion in the community over what the request is, and that there probably needs to be more time for the community to understand that it is scaled back, and it would probably be beneficial to James and his project for the community to have that understanding before we move forward with allowing additional height. Because knowing a couple of people who live in this community, I think it's been a pretty engaged community because they've seen a lot of transformation in their neighborhood over the last few years, and I know that the process to establish this zoning here was long and a lot of community involvement. And so I feel a little uncomfortable just subverting that today for this request. Not saying that it's a bad request, just saying that we probably need to allow the process to maybe restart and with this transformed, because that's a pretty substantial difference to say everything on 9 South versus one parcel.
Yes, and I believe that that was, a major factor, as you said, in staff's recommendation, was responding to the public comment on this particular application. And I think it's up to you to decide whether or not you want to allow that public process to continue through the planning commission process, or there will be more public process as it moves through the city council.
Right. Yeah.
So
good point.
it's
So-
not like it's devoid of
Right.
process
for
from
sure,
this point
yeah,
forward.
For sure.
And Mr. Chair, just to expound on that, I mean, when I read the comments, regardless if it was all of 9 South or not, the thing that really stuck out to me was most of them were saying, we were part of that process that created this form-based code. We were very engaged. We want that to stay. That's what really came forward to me, was that they were like, we've already decided what we want for our neighborhood, and listen to that. And so I don't know if those comments would substantially change, but I'm hesitant as well, because these people were very engaged 6 years ago in creating what they wanted for their neighborhood. And I'm also, one of the other things I wanted to expound on is one of the things you said, Molly, was about symmetry for both sides of the street. And as I look at the aerial, I don't know that I would feel comfortable with additional height all along 9th South on that north side. So then if we do it on the south side, we're just getting, is that little block that's blocked in by, that freeway on-ramp to 9th South, is that okay for that whole thing to go up higher? But then we don't mirror that on the other side of the street. And yeah, as far as like a best practice standard for urban design, I don't know how that translates then, because we clearly have more of a single-family residential going on the north side.
Right. So you see in the map up on the screen where all the pink properties are, and they're basically across these mid-block streets from each other, across Washington and across Jefferson. And then the zoning on the north side and the south side of 9th South is all FBUN2. So it's all purple. It's all, so the idea is to have that symmetry. And then at those main intersections is that there's a pop-up to emphasize that as a particular node or place, just like I explained in the previous example.
I mean, I would not be supportive of the higher height next to an FBUN1 zone. I mean, that's something that, if we were to move a recommendation forward, I think that is something that we should at least mention, because I think, this property maybe is unique because it's on a corner intersection and it's not next to, but I think across the street I can see if I was one of those houses in Washington, it is a neighborhood street. It's not a thoroughfare. It's not a major corner, right? It's not a.
Well, it's blocked in by the freeway too, so it's not like you're going to have tons of people going up and down that
Yeah,
street.
but I don't think I would want 65 feet on north. I think I can see why there was a decision made that north of 900 South on Washington, you wouldn't go up to 65 feet. Like, to me, that makes sense. Why? Because you have people who are zoned into 30 feet, right? Immediately behind it, and 65 is quite a bit higher.
But I feel like the whole purpose of this zoning in this neighborhood is kind of being defeated by those who've chosen to develop so far, though, because the zoning was put there to have higher buildings on the corner, and you're not getting that. So we want to I think we should get more density in that neighborhood, and that's what the zoning was intended to do. And since it didn't happen, I think this is a valid argument. I just don't think that this is going to become less dense. It's going to end up becoming overcrowded without more options there.
Okay.
I think,
go ahead, sir.
I kind of share some sentiments of all the discussions that we've had here. I mean, definitely agree that it's going to become a very busy intersection later on. However, I also want to have the neighborhood feel that they've been part of the process. And since they haven't heard, and they haven't been explained to and talked to about what the project consists of, which I think is a very worthy project, they might not have the right idea, or they perhaps have misheard things or something to that effect. So I'm more leaning towards following the recommendation that was proposed by staff in my case.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Andreas?
So, real quick question here, just looking at, maybe I'm reading the wrong part of this, but just this table here, where it's got building height and placement, cottage development, row house, family, multifamily residence, mixed-use storefronts. Sorry, there's no page numbers on these pages, so I don't know what one
Page
to
2?
reference. I believe it's probably page 2, yeah. It actually lists Washington Street at 900
That's the
South.
addition.
That's the text amendment addition
Oh,
that
that's
you're,
the text
that you would
amendment
be
addition. Okay, sorry, I did not
recommending.
say that that's the recommended addition.
And the applicant, Mr. Alfondre, brought up a good point about there being a typo because, as Wayne pointed out, the bold underline in that table suggests Washington Street at 9 South, not the southwest corner of Washington Street at 9 South. And it's very clear that the request is for the subject property and not for all four corners of that intersection. So that would have to be a, it's an edit that can obviously be made between now and when it goes to the city council. Either however you decide to make a decision tonight.
Okay, Andres, did you want to, did you feel like you want to do
definitely
something?
try.
Okay. You'll do great, I'm sure.
Very kind. Based on the information in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission recommended the City Council deny the Alfondre zoning map amendment petition PLN PCM 2017-00590.
Okay, we have a motion by Andreas,
I'll second.
second by Maureen. Any further discussion? We'll start voting with Matt. Well, I can change that voting if you'd like.
I guess I'm a no motion.
Okay. Amy?
Yeah, I'm going to vote yes.
Andreas?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Clark?
No.
So with 3 yeses and 2 nos,
Since we have 6 commissioners, I was going to see if I could go the whole night without turning my microphone on. I know. You have to have a majority vote to pass a motion. So this is a circumstance where the chair gets to vote. And really the only effect that might have is if you vote in favor of the motion to put it over the threshold of a majority of the commission. Otherwise, if you vote no, it's essentially a tie, and then we either re-vote or we forward a neutral or no recommendation to the council.
okay.
And maybe I don't know if I can list a comment with mine to the city council, but I would say, I mean, I'd be interested in at least talking or exploring with the community more what it would mean to allow it there but say that you could not go to 65 feet when neighboring an FB UN1 zone. I don't know if you can just list that in the staff report to the city council that one odd commissioner mentioned that as something to consider.
We always reference the one odd commissioner.
All right. Well, this is fun. So, I think ultimately for me, it's the process. I'm not really opposed to the idea of doing more density. I believe fully that we need to do more density around our transit stations. I do know that this neighborhood has had a lot of changes and a lot of intervention from the RDA and planning and a lot of changes, and they've been very involved and very active. And so for me, it feels incredibly uncomfortable to do something outside of that process, and I feel like that is this. But I don't think it's a bad idea to continue to pursue it and go back to the public with a better understanding of exactly what is going on here, to help them better decide, and we can get some better feedback what they would like to have in their neighborhood. And ultimately, this will go to the city council, and they will be able to have a conversation with the community, and they may see differently at that point. And that's their prerogative. But for tonight, I'm going to say yes and vote with the motion. So there it is.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And we are, so we are going to move the elections.
Well, yeah, we can move that.
we-
We were probably a little premature in putting the elections on there. We don't have to do it until September, first meeting in September, so.
No, if we can get rid of Weston.
So if you want to wait until you have more commissioners here to make that vote, we can put that on for the next meeting.
What do we all want to wait? All right. We're going to wait and push that to the next meeting. All right. We're adjourned.